This week, we welcome Vivek Ramachandran. He's the founder and CEO of Pentester Academy. Talk about their Attack Defense Labs platform and how the Pentester Academy is helping thousands of customers from government agencies to Fortune 500 companies. In the second segment, we welcome back, none other than Bryson Bort, founder and CEO of Scythe. Talk about purple teaming, top attack simulation scenarios, and testing command and control channels. In the security news, how to prevent a cyber war with Russia, the case against knee-jerk installations of Windows patches, U.S. customs and border protection data breach is the result of a supply chain attack, and a phishing scam that hacks two-factor authentication. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with their proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email at contact@netsparker.com. Is your IT team ready to face the next implementation or upgrade? Do you have a pool of talented team members who are trained and ready to support your organization's growth? The right IT skills development platform can get you past the IT skills gap. With training content that's so engaging, some even call it binge-worthy learning, your team will watch and learn more with IT Pro TV. Get a free team trial of IT Pro TV today. Visit securityweekly.com/IT Pro TV. Thinkst Canary makes high-fidelity honeypots that set up in minutes and requires no ongoing administration. Attackers moving silently on your network advertise their presence by tripping over them. There's a good reason Thinkst Canaries are deployed and loved by some of the best security teams in the world. They're inexpensive, they're simple, and they work. For more information, go to securityweekly.com/canary or direct message @ThinkstCanary on Twitter.
Come on down to Bob's High Colonics, where we will set you up with a Paul. That's Fresca, coffee, and bourbon all mixed together for a hot, spicy, fizzy piece of goodness that's as smooth as Paul himself.
Welcome to Paul's Security Weekly, smooth, fizzy goodness with some spice added. It's episode 609, recorded June 20th, 2019, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, none other than Dr. Doug White.
Hello.
What's going on, dude?
Python, Docker, malware.
A Star Wars Rick and Morty?
Yes, it is. It's Mr. Meeseeks
Yeah,
assisting a stormtrooper in the impossible task of trying to teach the stormtrooper to shoot the Wookiee.
Oh, my God. There's going to be lots of Mr. Meeseeks in that. They're not going to go away, ever.
No. It's just an endless cycle of Mr. Meeseeks finally pulling out the small amount of hair that Mr. Meeseeks actually has. So.
But why does Obi-Wan say the blast marks are too accurate for Imperial? I don't understand.
Yeah, he had wisdom
too
beyond
accurate
his
for
years.
sand people. I don't understand.
Or he was drunk.
How horrible must sand people be at shooting? Right? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah.
You appreciated my tweet on Rick and Morty where I said if the TV shows Fringe and Married with Children were to have a love child, it would be called Rick and Morty.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. I laughed out loud, literally. It wasn't just an LOL. I actually laughed.
Literally laughed. On the lines via Skype, Mr. Jeff Mann is here with us. Jeff, welcome.
Pleasure to be here as always, Paul.
Nice to have you. Mr. Lee Neely's holding his wine.
Yes, I'm happy to be here, ready for another fun evening.
There's no whining on this show, Lee. You can drink wine.
Okay,
totally
I'll drink
acceptable.
it.
You can drink it, yes. Wine is good. Alrighty, register for our upcoming webcast with SaltStack, IC Squared, and Viavi Solutions by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. You should do that. Today's webcast I thought was really awesome. We chatted a little bit about the right ways and wrong ways to use threat intelligence, and then Tarek from Domain Tools showed us how to use What was that tool called? Cap something. I should know this. He went through some. Hold on. I can tell you what it is because I have the slides right here. Cap Tipper. Cap Tipper's awesome. Have you used Cap Tipper before?
I have not used it, but I actually read about it. Yeah,
you give it a PCAP file and it carves things out and lets you cross-reference.
All the goodies out.
It was awesome. So if you want to see more awesome stuff, go to securityweekly.com/webcasts and get on that. I think there is one more announcement in here. No, there isn't. That was it. Vivek Ramachandran. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Is here with us. Those of you who don't know, I mean, Vivek he's a star. He's a star. You're building training at Pentester Academy. Vivek, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be on the show again. I think 6 years last time I was on the show. So
now, Vivek, is that short for something, or is that your actual first name?
No. It's just Vivek. Yeah, Vivek is my name.
It's just because I work with someone from India, almost 20 years ago now, right? And his name was Raghavendra Ragakrishna. I think that was his first name. And when he said it, like no one could say it. He's like, you call me Raghu, and that was his nickname, Raghu. I felt bad that we couldn't pronounce his full first name, but he was like, no, it's fine.
Well, you did pretty good there.
He's like, you call me Raghu.
Oh yeah, because I've been practicing for 19 years. Yeah.
I made it a point to learn how to pronounce his full name.
It's on his wall in there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm very impressed, Paul, because you mess up simple names like Smith when we have guests on the show.
Well, yeah, if it's a simple name, I underestimate it, and I usually mess it up. Mm-hmm. So Vivek, what have you been up to? It sounds like have you created like a new company in the past 6 years? I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, so I think the last time we were speaking, I had just started Pentester Academy, which was, just a collection of courses I'd already made for Security Tube, putting everything together. So I think, in the last 6 years, what we did was we really expanded that library. We created a lot of courseware, and almost the last 1 year, we've been working on this custom lab platform that we've created called Attack Defense, so that now you could do all the labs online. The key difference, of course, is, typically when you look at labs, then we all connect via VPN, but Attack Defense is completely browser-based. So you could actually launch these environments and jump into, your web browser, get a Kali VM, and immediately start attacking targets and all that. So, yeah, I mean, from a product line perspective, we've expanded the company. Now, actually, we have a whole team working on things. So it's been an exciting journey.
Vivek, how does that work? How do you get a VM inside of a browser like that?
Yeah, so what we actually do is, we deploy the entire network of, Docker containers or KVM-based machines. And then we have a gateway machine. And on that, we end up running actually guacamole containers. So then guacamole automatically ends up connecting over RDP to, whether your Windows VM or your Docker container, and then exports the entire GUI back to the browser. It's all over HTML5 and WebSockets.
Oh, interesting. Because there's a website that lets you try out like any Linux distribution. I'd venture to guess they're probably using the same, if not similar, technology.
Could be, yeah. They throw a VM container.
So there are a lot of these, browser-based HTML5 kind of export platforms available. But I think, guacamole from the Apache Foundation is the best. So we've kind of tinkered around with it, optimized it quite a lot for low bandwidth circumstances. And based on that, I think, it actually works pretty well. Nobody's... in the beginning, a lot of people did have an apprehension moving from, complete VPN to a browser-based solution. But now our customers actually love it.
Yeah, it's distrotest.net.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
What do you need at the student end? Just a browser?
That's it.
Because I'm having a flashback to a class I was conducting, and the instructions were to bring a machine so we could run a VM. And somebody showed up with an iPad. In your scenario, they'd win. They could do it.
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. And as architectures are getting more and more complicated, it's probably impossible to simulate everything, inside VMware or anything locally for that matter. So that's where I think something like this is really helpful.
Is that all sandboxed by the container, or is it sandboxed by the browser, or how is it contained?
Yeah,
or is it running remotely?
Basically, what we do is we deploy everything in the form of a container network, and that network itself is like in a pod. We don't use Kubernetes. We have our own little orchestrator just so that it's very optimized for our purpose. And that way we kind of create an isolated environment on a per student basis.
Okay.
So the browser is just kind of a dumb forwarder, kind of talks to Guacamole, and Guacamole ends up talking to the entire network behind it.
And it took you a year to develop that?
The platform itself, I think the first version was around 3 to 4 months. And then the team which created like all the challenges in-house, we have like 1,100 lab exercises.
Wow.
So, right from, network pen testing to forensics to IoT to whatnot. That actually took us around 8 to 9 months to develop. Of course, the platform is still an ongoing work.
Of course.
Do you have an academic license so I can run it in my lab?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a lot of, academic institutions we even give out like complete free access to. And we also have a community lab section. So you could just go to attackdefense.com, log in and start playing the free community labs.
Okay.
If you're a school, reach out to us and we'll actually give you a free account. Yeah.
I'm a school.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
I got my .edu.
So, Vivek, what are some of the more popular modules on your platform today?
Yeah, so I think, Metasploit always rules. So, given most of the people coming in are, beginning to intermediate, and everyone loves to get Meta-Predator. So the CTFs and the Metasploit labs are very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I think the next most popular one is a recon section, because we've added like all new components like memcache and NoSQL servers and, distributed queues and whatnot. So that I think is very popular as well. And recently we've also started doing red team labs. I don't know if you've seen our red team labs on Active Directory and Windows red teaming created by Nikhil. So that is something which is getting a lot of traction in the industry, especially for enterprise users.
And so what's the red team lab? Does it walk people like from start to finish through a red team exercise?
So we have actually 2 different labs. One is the Active Directory Attack Defense lab. So that actually takes you through all the basics of, different Active Directory attacks and how to go through them and all that. And then the Red Team lab is more of a challenge lab. So we have like a full-blown scenario of, medium-sized network, and people have to figure out once they get a foothold machine, how to kind of slowly go through it, or through the whole network and, get more and more goodies.
And is there training in courseware that's coupled with the labs, every single lab?
Yes. So we have Active Directory Attack Defense course as well as a red teaming course. I think together it's almost 22 hours created by, Nikhil Mittal. He's our Black Hat trainer as well, doing Active Directory Attack Defense. So it's very detailed right from the start, starts with the basics, goes all the way to advanced techniques.
If I had a pen test team, I would have every single person, regardless of skill level, go through that class.
Yeah, I think so. Can you pull things into it as well? Can you pull in other like targets or other devices, or is it just it's totally contained?
So currently it's totally contained, but what we are doing is we are working on a lab platform where you can literally drag and drop different components that you would like to see, so that you can customize your own lab experience.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome. That's so cool.
Because we have a lot of people kind of complain that you always get that one monolithic lab, and every student has to look at it no matter what their skill level. And that's where we are trying to kind of create your own customize your lab experience thing, where you could just drag and drop and maybe see more of Kerberos attacks rather than doing basic Active Directory enumeration, or let's say have like more of Java servers in there if that's interesting to you and whatnot. So
and just
that should be available in a couple of months.
And tweaking it around, regularly, because at least for academics, people will very quickly develop a solution to any problem and post it, and then it's half the people. I mean, I know that's ridiculous, and most of us are going, "Why would you do that?" But people do.
Yeah, exactly. And that is why what we are trying to do is create a library of different attacks and kind of keep it updated. We have an in-house team of 5 people, literally, whose full-time task is actually to create new labs, so that we can keep up with the demand, and at the very same time make sure that we add all the new stuff which is happening.
So this is a virtual cyber range. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a very, very portable kind of cyber range, like you've seen people build these giant, monolithic,
But modular
hardware.
too, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, I mean, but we've seen these that had modules. I've seen one that had a module. It's just like this big, it's a big piece of hardware that you have to set up, and it's very rigid, and this sounds a lot more versatile than that.
Vivek, when I sign up for the labs and I get in, do I get an attack machine that I can like copy and paste code in and all that stuff that can attack the other systems?
Absolutely. So basically, when you log into attack defense and run any of the labs, we either give you a Kali terminal in the browser. So this can be a regular Unix shell. The other would be you can actually get a full-blown Kali VM as well, where literally you have the whole GUI and all of that. And it literally feels like you're on the desktop because we end up co-locating the server closest to where you are. So I think you really don't feel like you're using a new platform or there's any learning curve, because literally you can get your Kali or your Ubuntu VM.
And you can copy and paste and all that stuff in between it?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So there is like a different shortcut key you'll have to use than Control-C, Control-V, simply because it's an HTML environment. So, but once you know those shortcut keys, it's pretty much you can copy and paste in and out.
That's awesome.
I hate this so much. Just because
it sounds like what you've been trying to build for
all
a long
these like
time.
10,000 hours I've spent building these things and cobbling stuff together, and then it's like, oh, here's this beautiful system, and it's all virtualized, and you don't need to buy like $100,000 worth of server equipment to set it up. It's just kind of like,
well, I mean, if you gave Vivek like $100,000 a year, if it's more than that, please correct me. He'd probably just license you the platform.
Probably, yeah, but I don't have that, so. But that's frustrating. It's great.
I think he said $1 million, Doug.
$1 million.
Yeah, whatever.
Well, hang on. I'll get my credit card. Can you take that over the air, please? I'm going to read the code. I'm going to read the number to you right now.
So the problem is there are so many prank calls happening from India that if I do call you, you'll probably feel that, I'm probably trying to get your credit card number.
I always give it out anyway. It doesn't matter.
So you bring up a very interesting point. What we are trying to also do is see if eventually, maybe in a couple of months, we can actually license out our platform to training institutes around the world. So, if you're running your own training shop and you don't have time to set up all of this, you can just spin up a custom portal for you and your students, and you can start using attack defense as an extension of your, existing training setup.
That's awesome.
So I have a silly question.
Good, Jeff.
Yeah, and maybe it's just some brain farting. You're calling it attack defense, but it sounds like you're teaching people how to attack. Can you expound on that a little bit more?
So we actually have defense-based lab as well. So, if you kind of log into the attack defense platform, you'll actually find that we are looking at defense. We have forensics, we have regular forensics, we have IoT forensics. We are also now putting in a little bit of blue teaming labs as well, so that you start seeing logs from different servers come in, and you have an ELK platform where you can start sifting through those logs and finding what is happening on your network. So we call it attack defense because eventually the vision is that you have equal number of labs for both red as well as blue teaming exercises. Of course, we've kind of started more with attack because that's what people love doing. People love rooting boxes. But if you log in, you'll actually see there's a lot of defense ones as well.
Is there a way, or have you thought about a way to sort of allow for a customer, an organization to, basically build within this platform, a copy of their production environment or a copy of their enterprise, or at least bits and pieces of it? So, rather than you guys just have a bunch of stuff in it already, but I'm thinking of a particular customer that I have, and I would love to be able to set up a mock environment that models what they have, and then demonstrate how easy it would be for them to be compromised.
I love it, Jeff.
So that is actually a fantastic point, and this is something we've just started doing as a pilot. This is actually for a DevOps team, and what they really wanted was that they have this. So this is a medium-sized startup, and they are going to launch, their whole new platform to the rest of the world. So they are having us model their entire development stack on our custom platform, And then they literally want to open this up to the rest of the world, almost like a little deception network online, so that people can come in, attack, their platform, and they can actually see what is happening so that they can prepare in advance for the kind of attacks or for the kind of security metrics you'll start seeing coming in through the logs when attackers are actually, attacking that platform. So yes, the vision also is that if we could go ahead and have an organization mention the different components and eventually have it drag and drop, so you could build staging environments which mirror your company's network rather than having a cyber range where you have, components you're never going to encounter. And that's really the part where I was talking about, where creating custom labs for you and what you need, rather than giving you one plain vanilla lab where you're just forced to use it, even if that's not relevant to you.
I could give you the app that I'm working on now, but it'd be more like that damn vulnerable web app. It would fall over really fast. Once I complete all of our projects to implement security in it, that's an awesome idea, though, right? Like, why not just take the app, throw it up in that environment, and let other people test it, and you're monitoring it in the background.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So we are actually deploying a lot of, systems like, PacketBeat and even custom EDRs if you want to go ahead and deploy that and see what's happening on endpoints, etc., so that you can mimic your environment even before it goes live.
Jeff?
I mean, it almost sounds like there's an application here, and I'm thinking of this because I was chatting with Casey John Ellis the other night. There might be a bug crowd type angle in here, crowdsourcing, not just the apps, not just, the newest thing you're coming out with, but actually try to, set up a mini version of a client environment and let people have at it, sort of like from a crowdsourcing perspective.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but that's also the thing about getting staffing over their privacy. They don't want anybody to know what they're doing. They don't want anybody to see it. Which, if you would let people do that, you would have fewer problems, because it's like a bug hunting environment, like on your ready to go live thing. And why not find it?
If you're
that'd be like bug bounty on steroids.
Yeah, I mean, if you're practicing good development techniques, you can totally. In fact, I just did this with our application. I was like, you know what? Drop all the tables from the database and start from scratch and see what breaks, right? And I had a lot of unit testing to do, but I've got it to the point now where you can drop everything in the database, right? The things you got to be concerned about are any API keys or passwords to your database left around in there, right? But you could totally deploy a stripped down version, of your app.
So you build a beta kind of version of your whole environment and throw it out there, and you can keep everything back you need to keep back, and just put it in there and say, go for it. Tell me what's wrong, and then you could watch it and just go, look at this. These guys ate me alive, and I really ought to do more.
Right. I mean, it could serve as a QA function too. I mean, right now in our app, you'd get a lot of internal server errors, but it can serve as a QA function too, right?
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. So the large enterprises we are talking to, the key complaint when we ask them is like, okay, what is wrong with existing, training solutions is because you have that one vanilla setup for everybody, a lot of times they have to sift through to what is relevant and what to kind of discard. And what we are trying to do is, by having this massive library of vulnerable components, we eventually hope that we literally have like the component you are using in your test bed, in your, actual deployment, so that you can now customize your lab experience. I think that's what we want to kind of move towards in the next 3 to 4 months.
It's interesting. You should also consider licensing it to instructors as well. Because I can tell you, to Lee's point, having been, SANS instructor or trainer at Black Hat, the one of the greatest challenges in producing a class is providing an environment to every student. Vivek knows. I mean, he's shaking. He said, you've done Black Hat training too, right, Vivek? That's the most difficult part. Like Lee says, students show up even though you give them the requirements beforehand. They're busy. They don't read them. I mean, okay. And they bring an iPad. I mean, it's their first class, right? And they bring an iPad. And I'm trying to be nice to folks that do that. But, sometimes people bring a laptop and they don't have administrator credentials. They don't have access to plug in USB devices. They don't have access to VMware. And then the other scenario is they do, and everyone's environment is different, right? And as great as Docker is, I can tell you what, you still have, Jack is our new developer, and we were trying to sync up our development environments. we still had to do some troubleshooting with Docker to make it work, because there's config that has to change, and that anytime there's config that has to change, there's an opportunity to introduce bugs. I've done it 1,000 times. With this platform, Vivek, it allows people to learn in such a great way without having to, take time to set up their system.
So being a hardware guy, Vivek, could I ask you a little bit about the horsepower that it takes to run this? I mean, so here let's take my this kind of thing. I mean,
what is that, like an i3?
Yeah, it's it's an i5. Give me a break.
It's a 5. Yes,
it's you have to pull start it, but it runs
4 gigs of RAM.
Yeah, but I mean, I have everything from things like this to giant VMware stacks that could run this. So
I think your server, your desktop at home is a 16-core i9.
Yeah. With 128 gigs of RAM, so that'd probably crank a pretty good model. But I'm just wondering, like, how much horsepower is this, and how does that translate? So when somebody shows up with an i5, $200 i5 compared to somebody showing up with an Alienware gaming laptop, are we, how limited are we?
So as far as the end user is concerned, literally you could run our most complicated lab even on your iPad or your tablet, and frankly, you could even run it on a phone. If you have it in you to go ahead and type things in. I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen, but I can just show you something in like a minute.
That's a great idea, Vivek. Yeah, we want to see it.
Bring it.
Okay.
I love what you built, by the way. It's even more awesome than I was reading about, Vivek.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
It sounds great.
Yeah, so I don't know if my
we can see
is
it.
visible.
We have a screen.
We can see it. Capture the flag.
Great. So this is basically so I'm on an extremely low bandwidth connection. So literally I'm on my phone right now using a tourist sim here in Singapore. So
is that where you live, Vivek? Do you live in Singapore?
So I was actually living in the US till November, December last year in California. Now this year we've actually started a very small office here in Singapore. So I'm kind of shuttling between California, Singapore, and India.
Gotcha. That's a lot of miles in the air.
Yeah. So this is the attack defense platform. And as I was telling you guys that, we have like a ton of stuff in here. So you see like all these network recon labs with, NoSQL databases, distributed queues and whatnot, traffic analysis, web app CVEs. This is the community lab section, which you can kind of go ahead and launch and play, which is completely free. I'll show you the ongoing lab. So I've already started like 2 labs. And here is the Kali lab I was kind of talking about. So let's say we go into the lab itself. And this is a simple CTF. I just want to show you like how the interface looks like. The simple CTF, this is you. Here is the switch. It also allow you to kind of like wiggle it around a bit. And once you start the lab and click on the link, what you'd find is, voila, you're actually inside a GUI system. And this is a full-blown Kali. And you have like the complete GUI system available to you right here. So you could go ahead, launch a terminal. So let's say you're going to launch a terminal, and now you can run Nmap and all of that, just like you would on a regular system. You could even go ahead and launch like your regular GUI tools, run all of them. So let's say we run, as an example, Wireshark or Burp or any of those. You could do that as well. So let me go ahead, launch Wireshark.
See, now I just want to license the lab for myself.
No, Vivek. I know. I'm like, okay,
now I just want to, I mean, for all the technical segments that I do in webcasts
think about
I prep for,
if
I often am messing around with VMs all the time and Docker containers all the time. How awesome would it be to just let my web browser, I can go do?
I mean, I've seen just spending 4 hours setting up a class, example that takes 10 minutes because it took all that time to blow all these things out. Right. And now it's just like, oh yeah, I'll just click here. This is.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm setting up a workshop in a couple of weeks for teaching auditors some stuff about scanning, and I've got 20 odd Kali VMs that they can boot, and now I'm going to have some targets and Wi-Fi, all that stuff I got to build to bring with me. Holy crap! This will work over a terrible connection.
You could do it in the Uber on the way to the hotel.
Yeah,
kind of. Yeah.
So I mean, I'd love to work with any of you, and we can reach out after the show, and more than happy to go ahead and give you access to the platform and try it out. Because right now I'm also looking from feedback from experienced instructors like all of you guys are, so that way we get to know what else we can build. And as you can see, even within these few seconds we've launched Burp. It just pretty much feels like you're on your desktop. Like there's no difference.
You're just killing me here. I'm watching you set this up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I launched Burp. It's just like, oh yeah. I think I spent a day on that last year.
So, Vivek, I got to ask you, of all the pieces of this, what was the thing that was there was no way in hell we could have done it, and it was amazing when they pulled off implementing for your environment?
Great question.
Yeah.
So I think the most difficult, there was so basically two different parts which I would say were very difficult. One was to create a custom lab environment, which is extremely affordable because, Pentester Academy, we hardly charge $39 a month, right? So we wanted to make sure that the platform was very affordable. So creating the platform, the network kind of, the service mesh and all of that from scratch, that was something very challenging because we really wanted to make sure that, this is something we can deliver at scale. The second part was, which Jaswin from our team worked on, was how do you go ahead and put in an entire desktop system into many of these containers, whether it's Kali, Ubuntu, or whatever, which is extremely lightweight, but still very efficient and works fantastically like you're seeing right now. I'm on a call, we are running a web browser with a full-blown Kali, but you hardly see any lag. I'm in Singapore, by the way. The server I'm using right now is US East Coast. So I think these two components was what really took us a lot of time to get right.
Vivek, are you hosting all these labs in AWS?
So the best part really is that we can host them in any backend. So we have AWS, we have Google Cloud, and actually this one is on Linode.
Wow.
Yeah, so everything is decoupled. So what we've done is we've made sure, because when you run an attack defense lab, you never know which provider can take you down, right? They might be like, hey, we don't want you to run this kind of stuff on our infrastructure.
Right.
So we've completely decoupled, and that's the reason why we wanted our own platform. We didn't want to run like, Google, Kubernetes pods and all that. And actually, the more difficult labs cannot be run in a Docker environment. So let's say you want to teach somebody how to write rootkits, right? We have a couple of low-level classes as well. So then you would need a full-blown KVM VM, but you also need a desktop system which can quickly be exported back into the browser. And actually, we can run all of that. So a lot of our labs does use KVM at the back end. We are currently integrating Hyper-V-based backends as well. So you could see your Windows environment completely in the browser, just as fast as you're looking at right now.
So how long, I'm thinking more in terms of targets, how long would it how long would it take for you to set up, let's say, a dozen Windows XP and Vista servers that are out of the box, default settings primarily, and they're not tied to Active Directory?
So actually, once we have the images, AMIs, or, for example, QCOW format or whatever in KVM, to set up a new lab, the best thing is we have our own orchestrator. So once the images are in, you could create a new lab, a new configuration actually in minutes. You just have to mention the lab networking in a JSON. It's more declarative syntax. And put that into a challenge, and it automatically picks up the images and creates the network.
Do you have the ability to set up VLANs or any type of quote unquote isolated LANs that are separated with some sort of firewall instance? Can you emulate that type of thing?
Yes, a very good question. So that is what we are trying to get probably ready by August, which is you can actually have layer 2 switching level control as an instructor. So that is going to be entirely built on a KVM environment with open switch and all that stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, and you could even put in pfSense components and everything. So currently in the public lab, we don't have that, but we are already doing internal tests and early private tests. But August, worst case September timeframe, you'd actually see those labs go public.
Cool. All right, thanks.
But did you say you have the ability for somebody to pivot from one network to another from a multi-home system?
Yeah. So, I mean, some of our more difficult pivoting exercises. So we have one which is called Mega Mystery in here that actually has like, I think 6 different LAN segments you have to pivot into. So I don't know if you're able to see this network architecture here.
It's squiggly.
Yeah, that's even better. You can drag it around and make it wiggle. You just kind of thrash it when you get frustrated.
Make it wiggle some more.
Now look what you made me do.
Vivek, what's that written in that's producing that diagram? Is that like in Angular or some kind of fancy web language?
So this is basically a JavaScript GUI-based framework. And what we do is from the backend, based on the network configuration, we actually just send back the JSON and it just renders it automatically. Next week onward, you'll actually also start seeing IP addresses and flag tags. So let's say this entire network with, I think this has a 3-level pivoting required to finish all the challenges. So this target would say flag 1, this would say flag 2. And as you enter the flags, it'll actually show you that you finished those flags right there. So you're hoping to expand this visualization to include IP addresses, flags, attacker movement, and all of that stuff
I want this so much.
Now, so I have another question. Is the goal for each of these systems to just gain admin access, pop a shell, or do you have the ability to, plant Easter eggs and actually play a capture the flag, capture a particular something and hide it somewhere in the network?
Larry and I play Find the Easter Egg all the time.
Yeah. So we have flavors of both really. Interestingly, we are also baking in deception labs in there, so that while the attacker is actually doing something, you can also view what is doing. So to answer your question, so pop boxes, get shells, and along with that, Easter eggs, plant things, eventually even compete against different users. So envision this, that you and your competitor both can go kind of head on against each other, and both of you get dropped into the same network, and then you can compete against each other for different flags. And once one of you captures a flag, the other can't get it. And then you can see a live scoreboard between, it's like a duel happening between 2 people or 2 teams.
Paul and Larry are going to want this in virtual reality,
Yeah.
But what about like red versus blue? Could you have one team trying to capture flags while the other is turning up the defenses as it goes?
Exactly. So that's what we are planning to launch along with the KVM in September is the blue team will get an access to all of the targets where you can actually like SSH in, or you get an SSH terminal right there. And then you're allowed to kind of like secure your services, change the configuration as you like, while the red team ends up getting the Kali instances or, the Ubuntu attacker instances, and they begin attacking after a delay or almost simultaneously. That's the whole plan.
Vivek, I have to ask about some of the limitations. It sounds like networking and storage you're providing. I would assume, this is a selfish question, audio and video doesn't come back into the browser, correct?
So that is actually a very good question. So looks like we might be able to do that. We are still testing it. So you can go ahead and put a software-based webcam or a software-based audio device onto the targets and actually stream a predetermined video. So what we wanted was, let's say someone exploits a box with Metasploit, then remotely they can take screenshots from the webcam, right? So looks like you can actually enable software-based webcam on a target and actually stream a constant video into it, which looks like someone working or someone doing something crazy. So that now when the attacker breaks into the box, he can run MetaPredator commands to go ahead and look at the webcam live, and you'd feel like you've actually attacked a real box.
I tell you what, you got someone that'll license that technology for doing for doing podcasts. After this segment, we'll compare notes.
I mean, our vision is, it's a bold statement. So, I'd probably prefer to kind of say that when it kind of eventually comes true. But hey, because this is a secure, closed space and you guys aren't broadcasting to the world. So I would almost go and say that, ideally the vision is to democratize, lab environments. So the whole idea is take all of this, build it, and then license it in a very affordable way to any training institute around the world who can white label it and use it as their own.
Well, and I mean, Doug and I both have looked at a lot of different CTF platforms, training platforms. I've never seen anything like this.
No, that's amazing.
Yeah, Vivek, you and your team have done a phenomenal job. I mean, just the design and consideration is astonishing.
Hell yeah! I mean, I was like,
the technology
I
is
keep saying I
astonishing,
hate
but, like,
this because it's just it's like I've looked at stuff like this before, and they're going, well, for only $100,000, you'll be able to get started. I'm like, and what does that do exactly? Well, it gives you a login. Like, to what? And they're like, well, it gives you login to a Windows command line and an XP. I mean, this is great. It's so awesome, and it's like taking advantage of all this great stuff that's out there and putting it all in one place. And I keep hearing the word affordable, which I like a lot because my budget is in the affordable class.
So right now we are running a promo where the entire Pentester Academy platform with all our courses, all our videos, and 1,100 of these attack defense platforms is just $39 a month forever. I mean, you sign up and get subscription.
You heard it here first. $39 a month. Like, oh my God. I keep hearing other things. He keeps saying $39, and I keep hearing $39,000 an hour, and but it's not. It's like,
Vivek, tell us a little bit about your classes on the platform that maybe step a little outside of security and cover skills that security professionals have to know, like programming, networking,
personal hygiene.
Yeah, things like personal hygiene. Yeah, social skills.
Right. Yeah. So personal hygiene, maybe some other platform, but yeah.
Come on, Vivek. You said it could do anything.
So one of the things you brought up a very good point. What we also have in here is, so let me give you an example. So we have actually offensive Python exercises so that if you wanted to kind of look at getting started. So I think Larry would have loved it if he was around. So we have a whole section where we have Scapy as well.
Yeah.
I know he does a lot of Scapy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I may have to quickly shut down 2 of the labs. So we've kind of put a concurrent limit on the number of labs any user can run.
Well, yeah, and that was the issue that distrotest.net ran into. They were covered in a Forbes article, and they by accident stress tested their network. And so they had they had to limit so much. So when I went to it today, I was number 29 in the queue before it could start my instance.
661.
Yeah. So I totally get you have to limit.
I was 61 today on that queue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I was hating number
to
29.
Give you an example, Paul, what we are doing is we are integrating programming environments in here as well.
Yeah.
So you can actually do even GDB in the cloud. So I'll just show you the Wi-Fi one. So this is actually a full-blown IPython notebook, which is actually kind of delivered to you. The whole Jupyter environment is delivered.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go ahead, start the Jupyter lab, and all of this under 25 seconds of starting the lab. And here you go, your IPython environment where you could learn how to program. There are different tasks. We give you the solution and all of that stuff as well.
That's fantastic.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's an awesome thing.
Yeah. And what we're also doing is things like Docker. So what I've found is a lot of times security professionals, they may want to look at Docker security, but they've never done Docker basics.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is also going to be possible in our KVM-based labs. Which is you could now run a Docker environment and start running Docker basic commands or starting containers and whatnot. There's one really cool thing I'd like to show you guys.
And I like that, Vivek, because I truly believe that a lot more security tools, well, I've witnessed it today. When I first started with Docker years ago, I was like, everyone's going to build their security tools inside of a Docker container. And lo and behold, I'm starting to see that in more and more projects that are newer. When you can get the tool by itself, but they also have a Docker container that you can run it. And what I like to promote in our environment is like, hey, if you're writing a script or utility, you build a Docker container system around it because that makes it more portable. Yeah. We can run it anywhere. It makes developing and testing that utility, even though it's a small utility, just so much easier. So I'm trying to get to the point where every piece of code that I write and touch, I'm deploying it inside of a Docker container.
People can learn it. So the other advantage of that is when people want to learn your utility or they want to learn your tool, being able to provide them with a Docker container means that they can quickly throw it up. I mean, even if that's not their production environment, they can quickly throw it up, practice with it, learn how it works, see what the limitations are, and then make a decision that's very educated.
In the webcast, Tarek was talking about Yara. and you can get a Docker container with Yara in it, point the Yara Docker container at a directory of malware, and run all your malware in that directory through Yara and run all the Yara rules through it.
There you go.
Awesome.
Right. And just to add on to that, guys, one of the dream projects I was actually planning as a free community project is envision all of these security tools as Docker containers, but alongside with that, also envision a simple venerable environment where you can test these tools against. So a community project like securitytools.com or whatever, where you can go in, you can select the security tool start, and then you have an environment where you have the tool available and a vulnerable system you can test it against so that you can quickly see how it works. And tool authors could end up actually providing both of these for the community, because hey, when they write the tool, they've already created an environment to test it, right? So it isn't going to be too much work for them just to put it out as a container as well.
And you could start building toolkits out of that as well, because you could start taking stuff like that, letting people evaluate, letting people rate, letting people test, and putting together what's the optimal toolkit for this particular scenario, and then you've got a whole collection of them and go, this is the one I think we should use. Oh wow. I feel
because
old.
a lot of people end up writing security tools, and if you see there isn't mass adoption of a lot of really good tools, really good gems in there, simply because you go to the web page, you have no clue what to use it against. So authors do a really good job building it, but a very poor job telling people how to use it or giving them a quick environment where they can immediately try to figure out like, hey, okay, I run this is the option, immediate gratification, and then that goes into your tool set forever, right?
The phrase works on my machine seems appropriate here.
So I mean,
and hey, I'm guilty of it too. Right? It works on my machine. I don't know what you're talking about, right?
It's running here.
It worked at my house. Why isn't that working for you?
Exactly. And I think tool authors should be doing this, because I've seen a lot of great tools. Nobody uses them because either it's poor documentation or no quick way to figure out like what to do. One little quick thing is we also have full terminal access. So it is like a T-Shark lab, and you can immediately get launched into like a Linux terminal. And now within this, you could pretty much like run just like you would. So we could do like a ls-a. You could run like T-Shark basically, on the interface or whatever you wanted to do. So right now we aren't permitting it, but in the other labs that we do. So this is another example of like you getting a terminal in the browser.
Vivek, in a closing out this segment, security for your platform, if you could speak to that, because you've built an entire ecosystem that are largely gonna be used by hackers,
right?
And you must be very concerned about the security. You just showed a Linux terminal coming up, and I remember back in the days when we used to have shell servers and all the heinous things that my friend Bob used to do on shell servers, right?
Right.
It just kind of reminds me of that. So if you could speak, if you could, for a few minutes about the security of the platform.
You're very right. I think, one of the reasons why we did decide to build a lot of things in a custom way was so that we could have very fine-grained control on the security. So now Docker itself, of course, gives some level of isolation. Of course, there are breakouts and everything available. So what we've actually done is, firstly, we've made sure we've picked up all the security features that Docker has to offer. So as an example, we use the Docker remap facility, where you can go ahead and remap it to sub-UIDs and sub-GIDs so that the containers really run as an extremely low-privileged user. Then over and above that, the entire networking is actually done using a kind of a service mesh. I don't know if you guys have heard of Cilium. So that internally ends up using things like eBPF and XDP and all of that, and allows us to really go ahead and deploy security at scale at a networking level as well. So we can actually create software-defined networking rules to, ban certain kind of traffic. Or if all of a sudden we see like a breakout happening, then it immediately goes ahead and, sends out an alert to us saying, hey, looks like the traffic from this little kind of, containerized environment is actually overflowing. Then, we've gone ahead and added our own little, so we use Sysdig. Most people may have looked at Sysdig. So we deploy
Sysdig.
Yeah, we deploy Sysdig monitor on our servers so that we can look at like what is really happening. to be honest, security, is a process. All of us know that. So what I try to do is make sure that look at Docker change logs every single day and figure out is there any new security feature we can incorporate? I wouldn't say it's 100% secure. Someone will always find a way to break out and do things. But yeah, by adopting some of these newer technologies, especially the ones which are using eBPF, XDP, and all of that, we're trying to make sure that we have an extremely good monitoring process and a lockdown process available if something does go wrong. One of the corollaries also is that we are learning a lot, and this is allowing us to build our defense labs, because if you look at it in today's modern era, being able to look at every single thing which happens down at the container level using a combination of tools does allow a defender to get a lot of information. Of course, at times too much information. So we are learning as we're kind of going along the process. So yeah, Docker security features. We have our own little custom tools which are monitoring traffic and sending it to an
Vivek, I'm glad to hear you say you're using Scythe. They're a sponsor of the network as well. So glad to know that we both looked at that technology and thought it was good. So that's good reassurance there. Yeah.
So I think Sysdig is really good. Sysdig Monitor is really good. The interesting thing is, and maybe in a couple of months, I'll send you a note if I can come back on the show as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm personally, working on an interesting project using eBPF and XDP and all of that to see if we could build in more interesting capabilities from a security monitoring perspective, which currently Sysdig and some of the tools don't provide. Hoping to even do a talk in a couple of conferences.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Vivek, that was extremely impressive, and I don't often say that, but
no, he's never says that.
I look at a lot of technology. We do a lot of briefings and we look at technology, and I a few times have been impressed with this type of technology.
Yeah. A lot coming from you.
No, I mean that is really, really impressive. Dr. Doug White blesses it. Doug's literally drooling.
I am. I want it more. I want it more than a Tesla X.
He wants it really bad, more than a Tesla.
Well, maybe not.
I'd love to reach out to all of you, after the show, and if there is anything we could immediately pilot with, because as I said, I want top instructors like you guys to give us feedback of what else you'd like to see, what other kind of labs that we can build, because there's only so much that we understand and we know. So if we can get that intel, then we can add all of that. And as I said, we have a flexible licensing, so we'd love for any of you to use our labs in your classes and even white label it. You don't even have to use it as attack defense. You could use it as douglabs.com.
No, I want to. That's a request I get from my instructors all the time. Is they want, what's the environment? Is it pre-built? Do I have to build it? How much time? And it's wow, if I had this, I can go. Here you go. Teach whatever you want. It's right here, ready to roll.
Awesome.
Vivek,
it's you have my $39 a month. I can tell you that, without question. I'm sure many of our listeners do. Totally worth it. So where do I go? And is there a code if I want to sign up for Pentester Academy and gain access to these labs?
So right now we basically are running our kind of final Pentester Academy promo, and what I mean by that is, providing these labs, of course, does force us to increase the price a bit. So
totally.
You could just go to pentesteraacademy.com. We have the online labs description right here. So one of the additional things I wanted to mention is we have unlimited lab time. So basically, you could run lab 24/7. You're allowed to run one lab at a time, but you can run it for as long as you like. And if you go to pricing, we are running the limited promo right now. And this would probably end in the next 7 to 10 days.
No.
Right now, $39.
Oh, no.
And you lock in the price. So, if you pay $39 right now and you continue your subscription, you can have this and all the updates that we plan to put out literally forever for just $39 a month.
That's fantastic. Vivek, thank you so much for appearing on Paul's Security Weekly. I don't know there's much more to say other than really, really awesome. I'm assuming you answered the 5 questions before because we're over time because we're just so excited about what you've built. Vivek, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
With that, we'll take a short break. Come back. Bryson Bort from Scythe. Stay tuned.
The biggest problem in security that remains unsolved is unprotected attack paths that allow threats to compromise vulnerable targets in the cloud and data center. But traditional microsegmentation is too complex and time-consuming. There's a better approach: Edgewise Zero Trust Auto Segmentation. Edgewise is impossibly simple microsegmentation, delivering results immediately with a security outcome that's provable and management that's zero touch. Driven by machine learning, Edgewise automatically builds policies that protect any application in any cloud without any changes to your network. They provide measurable improvement by quantifying attack path risk reduction and verifying software identity before it communicates to stop application compromises and data breaches. To see how to eliminate your network attack surface, visit securityweekly.com/Edgewise. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Everyone's still here, and I have a quick announcement. We're going to be at Black Hat and DEF CON. Specifically Black Hat, we've rented a suite to do a whole bunch of recordings. We've opened up more slots. We still have some availability on the Paul Security Weekly episode we're recording at Black Hat. If you're interested, go to securityweekly.com/booking to book your request today. Get in on that, because it's going to be awesome.
You should.
You should. Here with us is Bryson Bort. He's the founder and CEO for Scythe. Bryson, welcome.
Hey, good to see you again, Paul.
Nice to have you back on the show, Bryson.
Feels like home.
That's right. That's right. Talking about attack simulation, and specifically, you opted for all three. I was like, we should talk about this stuff. And Bryson's like, yes, all of it. I'm like, okay, let's go. Which is cool. The first one I wanted to talk about was purple teaming. And I know we've kind of talked about purple teaming in the past. We have described some exercises, but I really wanted to back up and kind of get your take, because I believe your solution really helps maximize the effectiveness of a purple team. But let's back up. What is a purple team? Why is it important? And let's start there.
Okay, so first of all, you need the right visual aid. So we have our purple unicorn here to demonstrate that. And for those of you at home who are really enjoying Paul Asadorian's shirt,
I get lots of compliments on this shirt, by the way, Bryson. I was at Ace Hardware today, and like as I was walking out, the dude at the register was like, "I love your shirt." So there you go. Has mass appeal.
Yeah, it does, and which is why we partnered with Johnny Long over at Hackers for Charity, and so all the donations, all the proceeds go to them for anybody who wants to get a shirt.
Sweet.
But back to Purple Team. I think first of all, it's worth noting Purple Team is not some separate organization. This isn't like we're going to suddenly have a purple team lead and we're going to be adding a whole bunch more security folks to do just that. I think the best summary definition I've ever seen is from Daniel Miessler, and he said it's where 1 + 1 is 3. And it's blue team and red team coming together in an orchestrated fashion where they actually work together. In some ways, purple teaming is overcoming the weaknesses that we've seen of cooperation and communication between red team and blue team. And as we all know, those have been many and manifold over the years for lots of different reasons. When at the end of the day, both teams are responsible for how do we protect the enterprise, and what's the easiest way to have a combined visibility on what both those pieces are doing? What's the easiest way for both of those elements to collaborate? And what's the easiest way for us to have orchestration for those components coming together? The way we do it in our platform is that the red team engagements are automatically integrated into the SOC SIM so that the blue team can immediately deconflict anything that they see and understand what's happening. On the back end of that, the red team can easily share that malware and those playbooks that they used because the platform automatically, since it's programmatically generated for each campaign, is unique. You're not compromising anything by giving the blue team the ability to bring that into the DevOps process, which I think is a really unique purple team future, where your engineers and your blue teams are able to construct configurations, detections, and the tools themselves with being able to test it with red team capabilities before it even gets to release.
It's interesting, Bryson, as you describe it. I wrote some unit test code for my application. And I didn't realize like how formal that was. So there's libraries to do that and everything. And I kind of look at a purple team as almost like a unit test, right? Mm-hmm. Because you got the attackers and defenders coming together and you're orchestrating those tests. And I like your vision of moving them into DevOps so that it's just a continual process of testing all of your defenses.
Yep, absolutely.
So what are the objectives like in a purple team exercise, and how should you construct them? Like, obviously you probably don't want to boil the ocean and you don't want to be maybe too narrowly focused. What's your advice on that front?
Very simply, I would start with the communication and cooperation. Having the blue teams and the red teams sit down beforehand and have the blue teams talking through if they're going to be doing a discrete red team engagement, what the blue team wants tested and why they want it tested and what they've already done based on threats they've seen and sharing that threat intelligence. And then, so the red team is validating specific things that are of value to them. It's tied back into the real world. I get very frustrated when I see pen testing and red teaming that's more artificial than it is real, because I think there's limited value in that. And I think that's a lot of what we see. And so starting at that beginning point, making sure that the communication is naturally there at a minimum, if you just know who to pick up the phone to talk to during an engagement. And then finally having a joint after action review where both sides talk about the results and the process for improvement.
Yeah, I think that's really valuable. I really like that process because in those initial meetings, and I think pen testers have these meetings today, but it's not a true purple team all the time. But in there, much like my code, right, and my network and security designs, I'm like, yeah, like that area over there, I know I have to spend some time there. Like, we're not gonna test that portion. Like, there's other stuff. I've spent some time. And, this represents what we believe to be our good defense. And we put some design effort into it and implemented some stuff. Let's test that. And then, like while that's happening, I know that I've got this other project I got to go address. If it's code, that really ugly area of code that I haven't touched in a long time, or that really ugly area of the network or applications or systems that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to that, and that kind of comes next up in the queue, right? Is that a pretty valid
approach? It's trying to keep that from happening. So it's trying to bring all those pieces together. So like we were talking earlier about try catches or try exceptions or whichever language you choose, and how stuff gets neglected because it's like, well, I'm working on this and forget all that. Yeah. So I think to me, and Bryson can correct me, but I mean that purple teaming was to bring all that together to make sure you weren't leaving things out of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would add, and it's not a well-known fact, but it is a good transition to our next topic about MITRE ATT&CK, is actually, while there are about 200 different objects in the MITRE ATT&CK framework, one of those is specifically how bad Paul's code is, and that it is a continual surface area of risk for compromise in organizations all over the world.
It is, to my defense, I inherited the code from 3 different developers, but that's not saying I don't.
Every developer ever says that,
right?
Of course, but only Paul has an actual column on the MITRE framework that says Paul's code. It's like we actually.
No, he doesn't get a whole column. He just gets a box.
Oh, he's got a box.
I mean, it's well deserved. I'm not saying I don't.
Box. I mean, come on.
I write really crappy code. I'm not.
The Paul's box lights up.
I'm not trying to mask that.
Yeah, your automated MITRE tool just goes like, you're screwed. You're screwed. You're screwed.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I think there was 244 last count because I asked someone who actually counted in the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Yeah, it's a big.
But now we can't possibly, Bryson, like keep all those in our head or go through 244 different test and expect to be able to deal with that, right? We've got to kind of meal that out somewhat. Do you have recommendations on how, all right, I'm reviewing MITRE ATT&CK, I got 244 things I can test for, like where do I begin?
Yeah, well, I mean, you didn't mean that to be a softball, but that's actually one of the differentiators I think our platform brings to the table is the ability to do MITRE ATT&CK across the enterprise in an offensive way with the snap of your fingers. And that's actually what converted John Strand over to our side to become a customer, was the ability to do that. But, shilling aside, I always like to start with the basics. And the basics are the fact that what do attackers do most and what's most common to your environment? And the first thing that I think we see a lot of, and red teams do this a lot as well, is PowerShell. And you don't want to look at all of the pieces. Actually, I'm going to step back. So besides not being able to look at all the pieces on average easily, the other thing is don't get too wrapped up in the specific techniques. Because you really want to be behaviorally focused when you're looking at your enterprise. I'll give an example. We had a client the other day, and we were doing an on-site trial with the Scythe platform, and their eyes bugged out of their head when the payload dropped, wasn't caught, and then started doing things, and they were just sort of like, we need to get this payload over to the blue team immediately to build a detection for it. And it's like, that defeats the point. All you've done is try to capture the handful of techniques that were demonstrated for that specific synthetic malware. You're not actually solving the problem. And so focusing on more on the behaviors gets you out of that mindset. So that being said, I think PowerShell is also a great example of that. So PowerShell is commonly used because it's great for an attacker when I show up and you've already given me an attack toolkit. I don't have to bring my own tools to the game. I'm just going to use yours. But the defense for PowerShell is actually fairly simple, because what you want to be doing is, since they have to log into your centralized instance to invoke it, auditing unauthorized PowerShell use in the environment is going to help you identify that's happening. And so that's an easy way to, again, defeat the technique. But you still want to be looking at what happens if they bring their own similar tools to the game, and your ability to detect those kinds of behaviors on hosts and at the network level.
Yeah, it's interesting. I when you describe it, I kind of think of PowerShell as like Bash on Linux, except you can't, I guess you could remove Bash on Linux, right? But people still need to use the shell, right? Essentially.
Some shell, yeah.
But better, and in using that as an example, better to identify malicious behaviors with PowerShell or Bash or whatever the language is, and try to defend against that than the specific invocation of a language and specific malicious things that could be implemented in that language or framework, right?
Yep. And then following that, since I personally believe that access is overall a losing game. You're going to work to build your walls. They're going to get breached. It's going to happen over and over again, and that's not solvable. And the most critical, if it's not destructive, the most critical element to malware is the ability for it to be command and controlled, and for the ability for it to exfiltrate the data that the attacker's going after. And so that ties to two parts of the MITRE ATT&CK, which are what they call standard application layer protocol, and then something like remote file copy. Now, what standard application layer protocol is, which is just a fancy way of saying the basic protocols, HTTP, DNS, SMTP, right? We're talking mail, we're talking the ability to resolve web pages, we're talking the ability to send encrypted web traffic.
Oh yeah, that's T1028. I don't know. It was.
Actually, I think it's T1071, Paul.
Is it 1171? Yeah.
Who cares?
There's a number there. Well, I covered it.
It has a number. It's what it is. It's what it is. These are the basic protocols that are happening in your environment, because if I'm an attacker, I'm not bringing something special to the game. I'm blending in with the traffic that you've got.
Yep.
I'm going to put on the sheep's clothing.
So it's interesting, Bryson. I gave in one of my webcast presentations, I took all of the attacks against the Empire in Rogue One, and I tried to map them back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework.
Oh God!
And now, if you haven't seen the movie Rogue One, now's the time to fast forward.
But if you stop, pause for a minute, go watch Rogue One, and then come back.
Come back.
Take notes.
So in Rogue One, Galen Erso is the designer of the Death Star.
Yes.
But in the movie, Galen sends communications to the rebels that, hey, I've built a back door inside of the Death Star, and you just need to get the plans, and it'll be pretty obvious that the thermal exhaust port is the way to go, right? That communication, right, is some kind of backdoor, communication channel. And so whether you're defending against a malicious insider like Galen, which is kind of a backwards way to think about he was a good guy working for the bad guy, so he was a
double agent,
a malicious insider. But anyway, but that maps back to the MITRE attack framework, right? In the way we look at, if, like Bryson's saying, if a flip the tables, right, bad person gets into my network, they have to exfiltrate data. And had the Empire paid attention to the MITRE attack framework and said, hey, we should be looking for these rogue communications, I guess you could say, then they would have seen that communication. In fact, there's a great scene where, now I forget the character's name, one of the generals in the Imperial Army says, I want to see all of the communications that Galen Erso ever did and want to review it for what's bad. It's too late, dude. Like, you should have been looking for that behavior while it happened, right? And I think that's kind of what to put that in a Star Wars context, what we're talking about.
And if it was really the Empire, they would have delivered like a giant pallet full of green bar. You know, it was like if it was a real Empire.
I'm going to disagree with you, Paul, and only from the perspective at, when I was working at NSA and we used to build cryptographic systems. So we're talking about more of a specific use case, as it were. Our going in position for trying to build a secure crypto system was always the assumption that the adversary, whoever that might be, knew everything that there was to know about whatever it was we were building. They had the instruction manual, they had a physical copy of one, they'd reverse engineered it, whatever. And the challenge was still to make sure that it encrypted. And of course, the key is the key. So I don't know if that, to be fair, I don't know if that applies in this instance. But
well, it does. And it speaks to the Empire's shortcomings of believing they had built something that was secure, right? To them, it almost didn't matter. If you remember the scene in A New Hope, where we're the supreme power in the galaxy, right? And that you can't, at NSA, Jeff, you didn't make that assumption, right? You assumed that we had leaked the plans,
right?
And we had to design a more resilient system, knowing that someone might have the plans.
Now, I've had a few drinks, but does that make Jeff Jar Jar Binks? I'm not exactly sure in this analogy.
So.
I'm kind of confused, but
I used to think so.
I don't have my Star Wars notebook
He
handy here.
self-proposes he's Jar Jar Binks. Yes.
Doug, I know. Well, I don't know where you live, but I know where you work.
Hey, Lucas says it's all about Jar Jar. He's quoted as saying that. And if you think about that, I'll leave that as an exercise to the audience. It's kind of true.
I'm sorry, Jeff. I couldn't resist. But
well, my point ultimately was, I don't think that the issue was, and you're framing it a little bit different now. I don't think the issue was that the Empire, let communications leak out. The issue was that there was this vulnerability or backdoor built into the system. However, and it's funny because I've actually been on a Twitter chat this afternoon, and even during the episode, where somebody brought up the Death Star analogy and the whole exhaust port thing. And, we're using that to try to frame an understanding of risk and, what is the vulnerability? What is the threat? What is the countermeasure? And my question to you, Paul, is, let's say that the Empire should have either done away with the exhaust port or maybe put a mesh screen on front of it, done something to mitigate the vulnerability. In assessing the risk posed by that vulnerability being there, should the Empire have taken into account that ultimately there'd be somebody that had the Force on their side helping them, or should that, was it enough for them to say, well, the Rebel forces, there's no way they're ever going to be able to shoot a photon torpedo under this thing. So we're, because they had countermeasures in place. They had all sorts of, I haven't seen the movie in a while, but all sorts of cannons and guns firing things on this Death Star itself. They had all the TIE fighters as defenses, and what was the likelihood that a member of the rebel force using the force could actually pull off the shot of a lifetime?
The technology in the Death Star is insignificant compared to the power of the Force.
You can't beat the supernatural. I mean,
if you disagree, you might get force choked.
You can't beat what the script says.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right.
If Lucas says it, it's going to happen.
Bryson,
remember, two movies later, they added a force field around the new Death Star that had to be thwarted from the planet.
Yeah,
so they
which
upped their
was
defense.
like you couldn't have put that off switch on the Death Star or something. Yeah, whatever.
Getting back on track off of Star Wars.
Bryce is like, what the hell?
we went down a little bit of a tangent, reeling it back in. If you're defending Microsoft Active Directory, Bryson, we've established that identifying behaviors, right, is a thing which led us down the whole path to the dark
rabbit
side.
hole of the
whole path to the dark side. But what's your assessment, having developed and architected this tool? How should people approach Active Directory security? What should the testing process be, and how should they prioritize their defenses?
That's a really broad question.
And you've got to put the whole thing in an analogy from Star Wars.
Are there?
Well, let me break it down for you with a simple
Active
question.
Directory is like the 1970s file disk retrieval system that was on that storage planet where the plans were actually kept that the rebels had to break into.
There you go.
That's a great analogy, Bryson.
Hell, yeah.
It makes sense. It does.
So you have to make sure that your force field is only granting access to that to the officers that are supposed to have access, which are sysadmins.
Right.
The other part of that makes no sense to me is, or it's a better demonstration of the fact that we like change technologies every generation and we keep like going backwards and then we go forwards and go backwards and go forwards. So apparently it's going to be the cloud in the future is going to be an isolated planet-sized storage system.
For which I can impersonate credentials to gain access to, which happens in the movie. Is that the primary struggle when customers and potential customers are running your attack simulation platform? Does a lot of it come down to projects they have to execute to secure Active Directory?
So I mean, not necessarily. Active Directory is certainly very popular in red team engagements because you own AD and it's like drop mic, I win, I got everything. But I don't think that's necessarily realistic to the real world. And if you look at the way an advanced persistent threat is going to be moving through your environment, they're going to, first thing is they don't land knowing where they are.
Right.
They have a general idea of, all right, I got to call back. Like, I think that's that organization that we've been targeting for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is. But where am I? Where exactly did I land? And am I safe? Okay, I'm safe. Now I'm going to call back home and I'm going to pull down additional capabilities and communications to build up my local payload. And then I'm going to start looking around and I'm going to figure out what's of interest around me and how do I get there. And I'm going to start laterally moving through to do that. And the reason advanced persistent threat's going to use that approach as opposed to a more common Active Directory attack is because Active Directory, it's visible in the system. There's fingerprints, and those can be fingerprints that can be hard to hide. Whereas my ability to continue to evade you at the host level where you never see me, because I defeat all your EDR, and then to continue to blend in internally with internal traffic is going to ensure that I'm able to walk my way and establish my proxies and way out for exfiltration. So that's, I think, a difference between a real world and a red team approach.
So real world attackers don't go in and try and map the entire Active Directory. Essentially what you're saying is it's too noisy. They're going to resort to what I would imagine to be things like packet sniffing, right, to get a lay of the land, and things that are more stealthy and next to impossible to detect.
Well, just think about it from passive collection. Ethernet is promiscuous.
Yeah.
So just by sitting there on
traffic, you'd get tons from broadcast traffic.
Yeah, so I can sit there quietly, just sniff off of Ethernet and map out the network, and then decide to make my move when I want to.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you could monitor NetStat and Ethernet broadcast traffic and gain a lot of information just from that.
Probably monitor the whole network.
And if you're not detecting the initial, the infection in the back door and the C2 channel, then Bryson, you're right. That's what an attacker is going to do, a smart attacker.
And that highlights again why it's so important to do for two pieces. One, the best friend of defense is heterogeneity. And then tied to that is what you're able to do with segmentation, with being able to create choke points. Because anytime something changes or anytime I have to go through a new gate as an attacker, I have to stop and repeat that process again. And every time I repeat that process is an opportunity for me to make a mistake.
Yep. Yeah, I've been pondering lately how much an attacker can emulate regular behaviors in the network, whether that's an application, whether that's a system service, a system process, or an actual user, before they make a mistake that the blue team can detect.
You could almost model that.
Right?
I mean, you could almost model that with statistics and go, what's the likelihood? So it's like a Poisson distribution of what's the likelihood you make a mistake.
Because the better defensive techniques that I've encountered, Bryson, really are able to tell you when something steps out of the norm like that. That a user or a process or something is doing something slightly different. I mean, there's very subtle differences, but like you said, Bryson, the more choke points you put in, the more the attacker may have to step outside the bounds of what normal looks like, right? And that's what you want as a defender.
Exactly. And the one place an attacker can't change the laws of physics is when I'm on the wire.
Yeah.
I go to 1 zeros like everybody else. And going back to the MITRE ATT&CK framework, where we're looking at those standard application layer protocols, which there's the external ones, then there's the internal ones, like SMB, RPC. And my ability to what's normal behavior on those protocols, and any anomaly is going to be your opportunity to identify something that no matter what you're seeing at the host level, there's proof that there's something going on there, because there's no way for them to hide there on the wire.
So it sounds like it's more important to do that behavioral detection more so than to go in and try and harden every single setting and condition in Active Directory, which is a huge undertaking.
Absolutely. That's what I advocate.
I mean, 1,000 years ago, I used to write scripts that looked at keystrokes. And I knew what keystrokes people typically typed on the mainframe. So, I mean, we could see every keyboard on the mainframe wire.
You had a machine learning algorithm back then, didn't you?
Yeah, right. It was called me. But I wrote scripts that looked for people to type things that were unusual. People type the same stuff over and over and over again. And when I saw somebody type something weird, they went on the shit list. And my shit list I generated every day, and I could look at my shit list and go, look at this guy right here. Who is this guy? And I would go look at that person and find out, this is some weird person. Why in the hell would they type this? And that was a person I started watching real heavy, because they were doing something that just started edging outside that nice, normal plan. And when I saw those people, almost invariably, they were people that were up to no good. I mean, literally. I mean, they would almost always be somebody who was going to try something. And I started logging the hell out of those people, because that was how I targeted logging. I mean, I went in and said, I'm going to watch that guy right there.
Reminds me of a Black Mirror episode, because I kind of, whether she can like look inside the brain of her child.
Oh yeah, the person can see the memories. Yeah,
I kind of feel like that when I'm looking at someone's like bash command history, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like we've gotten inside them, and I can like see their thought process and what they're thinking. But what you're saying is we need to extrapolate that out into.
I think you should. I mean, I think that's that kind of intelligent analysis that lets you exclude all the average and just focus on the exceptions. I mean, that's. Yeah,
the entire history of you.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
That's right.
So the way I phrase what you just said there is we're reducing the size of the haystack, because defense is looking for needles, and being able to attenuate detections and our processes to focusing on those kinds of anomalous behaviors allows us to reduce the size of the haystack that we're looking at and take all that noise off the table, which is just a waste of our time.
You're trying to find an infected needle and a stack of infected needles.
Wow.
Is that like a heroin reference? Like, what are we doing here?
I'll be right back.
That's.
I'm
ahead, Lee.
wondering. You mentioned, finding a path back for C2 and access. How common is it for the path to the internet to be blocked or required authentication, or is that really unusual?
for there to be any trouble getting back to where you need to. I know we've got plenty of defenses for inbound, but are those
not hard
there?
at all? That's barely an inconvenience.
Because there's so many ways to construct that C2 channel, right? I guess it comes down to behavior versus signature, right?
I'll give you a great example. How often do you inspect all the Google Suite traffic that's leaving your organization or Office 365?
That's in the Alexa Top 100, Bryson. So like that's automatically excluded from my analysis.
Yeah,
we have there's so much control channels that use those protocols.
Right. Well, I've been working with a group that has outbound authentication, so you can't access the internet until you authenticate, and it doesn't do single sign-on. So you really have to, use something to get on there. Of course, while it's open, you could hop through as good as their traffic, but at least it's not 24/7 open.
Yeah, so I would have to. That's an example of pattern of life where you would have to use the channels that are available as the operator. The user is there at that moment. So you've got an 8 to 10 hour window every day during the work week.
Yeah, it's similar to when everyone started implementing proxies, and then every attack tool adopted the ability to use that same proxy and authenticate the proxies. Yeah. We're just riding on whatever top of authentication that we have.
And that's what we do.
It's still a lot of doing the attack simulation, figuring out which command and control channels you can detect and how you detect them. That's one of the more, I think, important parts of the test, right? Because like you said, you're not going to stop an attacker from getting in. You're not going to even be able to detect the best attackers via logs or other system behaviors. But everyone's got to send traffic over that wire, right?
Yep.
Is that kind of the starting? Is that a good starting point, I guess?
Yeah, it is. And so the lightning talk I gave at AttackCon last year, I came up with a different way to look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So instead of it being 244 boxes with all of these individual pieces, I break it into two axes: communications, capabilities. Capabilities are what I can fundamentally do on a host. Communications are all the ways that I can talk. And by segregating it that way, that makes it very easy for me to dial in on that kind of focus.
And I mean, suffice it to say, if you haven't run an attack simulation tool or looked at the C2 communications coming out of your network, the first thing you want to do is take away all the obvious ones, right? As the first step, right? So you're forcing the attacker to use something else, right?
Yep.
And to act outside that norm.
Yeah.
So the minute you take away those opportunities, they have to go outside that nice little standard box that you've put everybody else in. And the minute they step outside there, you can say, oh, there, I got to watch that guy right there. That's the guy I'm looking for.
Then I would imagine it comes down to like using Google services in general as a C2 channel, is being able to differentiate between a legitimate user of any type of Google service like that and a malicious user. What do we have at our disposal as defenders, Bryson, to detect that?
I don't have the answer yet on that one.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
It works so well for us.
It does. It does. I mean, having done threat hunting, a pen tester friend of mine was like, well, yeah, I'm just going to use a social media network or, a Google Drive, whatever you're using in your organization. That's my C2 channel, and good luck finding me, right?
Yep. That's why we also use Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, Twitter was actually his example. He was using, and if you allow Twitter in what are you going to do? Block? You could, I guess, you could block Twitter, right?
Good luck with that.
But then you're just going to use some other social media. You're going to find whatever's allowed out.
Which again, it's right if you think about it that way, because I mean, Twitter and Google are just whitelisted domains instantiated in HTTPS fundamentally, right? If we're looking at it, it's really just a protocol of HTTPS going to some place that you think is trusted. And so again, getting out of that technique, where can we start to establish the behaviors and looking at that with using those things versus just being like, all right, we need to be paying attention to all of these things.
I mean, you could look for traffic patterns, but that still gets difficult.
And it gets lost in the noise.
I mean,
it doesn't. But I mean, you can look for a signature and say, "Bang, there it is." But I mean, when you're talking, now you got a massive job load there to try to do analysis, especially with Twitter. Jeez.
I mean, it's great odds the attacker is going to be able to do, even if you're looking at least frequently occurring, most frequently occurring, and data size and things like that.
Good luck.
It's still when you're using a trusted source.
That's
like
a big job.
Absolutely. Okay, now we're all scared.
Yeah, we're all scared. I'm leaving.
So, Bryson, product updates. Since you've last come on the show? Are there new features, payloads or things that you've built into the product?
So we integrate the Atomic Red Team framework by Red Canary.
Mm-hmm.
So you're able to just import those modules, and now they're weaponized in. We also use the MITRE ATT&CK framework to allow you to build up the payloads and the logic and TTPs into the payloads themselves, which I think is really cool. You get this picture of the whole framework, and you just click on it, and then it has multiple options. You click it, and it automatically integrates that to build out your custom payloads. We're about to release OS X, so we're going to be on Mac now. So we'll have all the 3 main desktop operating systems covered. And I think the thing that's most exciting is while lateral movement has always been a capability that's there, we're building out an entire wizard in the GUI that will allow you to build out all your lateral capabilities and automate those. So now you're going to be able to create this custom worm that's going to be able to really move through things automatically for you.
And that's great, because as we were talking, it's great to have a C2 channel that's super hard to detect. However, I can only do so much damage to the organization if it's difficult for me to laterally move, right? Or I have to get noisy to laterally move. So that's a great addition to the framework, Bryson. I like it.
Yeah.
And folks can sign up for a demo on the website, correct? That's still how...
You can get a free trial.
Free trial. And that's all...
I will note that we only give free trials to enterprises because as you continue to talk about, I think pretty much every episode, how everything I build is really scary. We do not want this to get into the wrong hands, so only enterprises are allowed to have access to our platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. securityweekly.com/Scythe will get you there, and you can get, provided you work for an enterprise and you're not an evil, bad person, you can get a trial of the platform. I encourage you to do that and listen to this segment, I think, to really kind of guide you where you want to start.
Go check this out. I mean, this is such a nice product that you should really take a look at it. I mean, if this is something you're thinking about implementing, I really would like. I mean, I like it. I think it's just a cool thing.
I really do relate it to like unit testing.
Yeah,
code.
absolutely. Yeah. I know you've drawn everything back to unit testing today.
That's what I've been doing.
I had a slice of pizza earlier, and you're like, that's like unit testing in a way.
Yeah. You weren't unit testing your pizza. You were consuming it. It's different.
It's almost like unit testing.
Well, Bryson, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
I'll see you in Vegas, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll take a short break, come back with the security news for this week. Stay tuned. In 2018, ransomware advanced significantly and is now capable of taking out infrastructure and operations across the globe. As a result, many organizations are bogged down in reactive work and often overlook the value of crucial information. In Domain Tools Threat Intelligence Report, learn how to uncover some of the most critical insights from your organization's alerts and indicators that will allow you to shift to a more proactive posture. To download this white paper, please visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Recorded Future. They help security teams make more confident decisions faster. Recorded Future's technology automates broad collection and analysis of cyber threat data and delivers the rich external context you need to understand alerts and emerging threats. With real-time threat intelligence from Recorded Future, security teams respond to threats 63% faster and find undetected threats 10 times quicker. To get started, go to recordedfuture.com/securityweekly and sign up for the Recorded Future Cyber Daily. Every day, you'll receive an email with the top results for trending technical indicators, cyber news, exploited vulnerabilities, suspicious IP addresses, and more. Subscribe today and stay ahead of cyber attacks. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Little inside baseball. Doug was joking in the previous segment how I'm always talking about code and unit testing and all that stuff. One of the reasons why I want to push the next release of our code, and everyone's like, What is your code? What are you talking about? It's a security problem. I'm like, no, it's the code that lets us push content for all of our shows, which is great that I get to be involved with that and use it as examples for security. But functionality-wise, the reason why we're encouraging people to go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, tell us about your interest, join the list so you can tell us about your interest, is all the software is going to be interconnected. So as we publish shows, they'll be tagged with certain types of content. If you're interested in that, it's going to send you a notification. So the reason why I've been so hot and heavy on getting our application and doing coding, one reason is, other than I'm having a lot of fun, the other reason is there's actually business requirements that we do this. And one of the new features is so that our listeners can subscribe to a site, say, I want to know about application security, I want to know about attack simulation, whatever it is. And every time we publish content that's in that particular category, if you will, we'll send you a notification.
And you need an everything button.
Or if you want to get notified about everything, you don't really need to create an account. Like, just go subscribe to all of our shows.
I know. Well, right? Yeah, so subscribe to all the shows.
But that's what's happening. People are getting overwhelmed doing that.
Well,
and then...
But some of us are, keep getting asked, like, all this stuff, right? It's like, oh my God.
The other project that I'm pushing to take some time out to be able to do is I want to have transcriptions of every show.
Ooh.
And so I've been looking at some technology to do that. Most of the technology out there requires that you go to a third-party service like Google or IBM or one of these other services that will transcribe your audio file. And there's tons of transcription services. For the amount of content we produced, that cost is pretty high. Yeah. We're talking like hundreds of dollars a week, which starts to add up over time. So I kind of want to do that on our own. So we'll see where that takes us. I think that'd be also a really fun little engineering project to take on. And we'll see. My guess is there's a Python library. I don't remember the name. But it doesn't require that you subscribe to a third-party service. You can do it locally. Yeah. I wonder what the differences are between the accuracy.
I don't know, but we can have some fun coming up with words that it can't translate. Or it translates into other meanings.
There are some that you can train.
Rural juror.
There was one where you could give it like training files. Like this is what the language normally looks. I mean, it's basically machine learning. It
needs to know what Paul's voice sounds like.
Yeah, and how I articulate. I mean, that's a perfect use case for some kind of... that's what I was thinking. My other thing was, could we write code so that when you search the transcripts, that there was a blood alcohol level that was associated with that based on the way
That's the weighting. That's the weighting. So you keep sliding the scale. So by
So based on the way that I speak, it would interpret that speech and make a determination as to my blood alcohol level.
Exactly.
So that when you found certain pieces of content, you would know how much.
So something like "You kids get off my lawn" comes out as unit testing is very important.
No, it's not transcribed. It's a level. It's
a level. It's a sliding
You might
scale.
want to keep that derived blood alcohol content strictly need to know.
That's right. That's right.
I think you should put it on the screen. It's because the blood alcohol content's rising.
Yeah, like as you're watching the
I
episode.
know. There's like a meter on the side. Like, try to push Paul over the top tonight.
Security Weekly will also be at Hacker Halted in Atlanta, Georgia, October 10th through the 11th. EC Council has a 15% off discount for their boot camp courses or workshops. You can go to securityweekly.com/Hacker Halted to get that and sign up today. Make sure you do that. We're going to have a fun time. I'm going to have a fun time with Jeff and all of the Security Weekly crew that's going to Hacker Halted. We're going to be at that super awesome cigar lounge in Atlanta. Looking forward to it, Jeff.
Me too.
And you'll also be at Black Hat. We get to have a cigar and a drink at Black Hat, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good.
And DEF CON.
I miss my Jeff time. Jeff, we haven't had a cigar and a drink together in person in a while.
I'll be in studio next week.
Oh,
the last cigar I had with Jeff that was not here was in a 3-sided structure in South Dakota at like 20 below zero.
I saw those pictures.
That was cool. That was actually cool, Jeff. I enjoyed that a lot, but it was actually a 3-sided structure outdoors in South Dakota in the winter. So
it was even better when we found the cigar shop down in town.
Well, yeah, that's true. Then we got to sit on a couch instead of freezing our.
Yep.
Anyway, we've got stories to talk about. We might as well get ready because we were talking about this at the break. There was a senator, congressman, someone who was supposed to speak at Black Hat.
Congressman Hurd, yeah.
Congressman Hurd. I really I liked Jennifer Granick's comments on this because I think they were unbiased and based on the facts, and I like that she pointed those things out so that I don't necessarily have to like share my own views and have those misinterpreted, right? Because I really like the way she analyzed the situation. She's also not only a fabulous person, but also an extremely intelligent attorney on matters such like this. And so basically there was Congressman Hurd, who was scheduled to speak at Black Hat. Keynote Black Hat because of his knowledge, apparently, of cybersecurity. However, when they looked at his record for voting on bills, I think it was solely based on this record.
It was based on that.
He voted against several bills dealing with abortion and women's issues, rights, women's
STEM.
STEM. There was a bill for STEM and enrichment for women, and he voted against that. That's the one that I really like. Political issues aside, you got to promote STEM for everyone in the U.S.
Yes.
That's the only way we're going to get people to work in fields like cybersecurity to help us make the world a better place, to help be developers and fill all these positions in the companies that we want to create in the U.S., right? That's near and dear to my heart. I've done a startup. I created Security Weekly. I want to see people that have engineering and are passionate about engineering.
Why would you not promote that?
Why would you not promote that? And also, there was a lot of, you can go view, because it's public record, the details of all the bills that dealt with women's rights and also a women's rights issue of abortion. Now, what Jennifer Granick pointed out, she is legal counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union, asked what other views would disqualify someone from speaking at the conference. In a tweet, she asked, should Black Hat now ask potential speakers for their views on abortion, or is it fine so long as we don't know? That is such a loaded statement that afforded me the opportunity to consider what happened in various lights with an unbiased opinion, right? Or an unbiased kind of questions, right? So what I gleaned from that is asking is, are the political views criteria for being accepted to speak at a conference or not? The other question that it brought up was, in this case, it's not only that person's views, but a documented track record of voting against women's rights. Therefore, justifiable to be asked not to speak at a conference or not? Because that is a slightly different situation in my mind. It's not you're an individual. You have influence over what bills are passed in the United States. That to me was kind of an interesting issue and question to pose. And is Jennifer's questioning the access to information. So as long as we don't share or publicize our views, then it's okay to speak regardless of what your unpublicized views are. Because that doesn't seem...
If you politicize it, it becomes a weapon. So it's like the same thing as a company. Mm-hmm. So if you take a company, I'm going to call it Company X because I'm going to stay off the political football.
Yeah.
Company X is sitting out there and they say, I sell wine. Mm-hmm. I don't care. I'll buy wine. I like to buy wine. I like to buy bourbon. I like to buy all these things. I don't care. But the minute you take your company and you say, you know, Doug, I actually am going to be a whatever company. I'm not going to go anywhere with this politically.
Yeah. So let me try and phrase this for you, Doug. We sell wine, but we do not like XYZ.
Exactly.
And if you like XYZ, we don't want you to buy our wine.
We don't want your business. Yeah. All of a sudden, that's politicized. It's not wine sales anymore. That is now a whole political animal, and I'm going to make a decision about it. Left, right, doesn't matter. I'm going to make a decision about it based on the politicization of it, and then it becomes an issue. If it's just...
This comes right back to drawing a penis. Google's...
okay, I'm out. Yeah, this is...
No, it does.
No, I know.
So Google built an AI penis detector.
They did.
Does this mean we're moving on?
No, sorry, Jeff. But
it means Paul's about to whip it out.
Time out. Let's go back to Congressman Hurd, accepted to speak, and now not speaking at Black Hat. Jeff.
Well, okay, so we were moving on. So just a couple thoughts, and I don't know all the details, and I'm actually struggling. Do we actually have an article in our notes? Because I'm not seeing it. If we do,
there are articles. In there,
Article 8 under Paul's stories.
And just for context for our listeners, it does link to an article. I want to say it's from TechCrunch. Could be someone else that broke the story, Jeff. That also links to Black Hat's official statement on the issue.
Okay, I was searching for Black Hat, but I spelled it as one word, so I wasn't seeing it. My bad. I'm an old timer.
No worries.
Not knowing all the details, I actually, because I'm on the media list, as I'm sure you are too, Paul. You probably got the same email saying, "Hey, we're excited to announce this guy, Congressman Hurd, is going to be keynoting. Let us know if you want to speak to him." I'm like, yeah, I'd speak to him. And then, a minute later, I get an email saying, "Oh, never mind. We changed our mind. We had to pull them." And then I've been busy, so I haven't really looked up all the details. But just based on your description, I think the first question philosophically that we should be asking ourselves as a community is why is Black Hat or any security hacker or cyber conference inviting a politician in the first place? Is that a prudent thing to do? And to answer that question in part, I would say, well, as much as we bitch and complain about, government overreach and we have all sorts of conspiracy theories, the irony is so many aspects of our industry, when we look at what's actually going to make a difference, what's actually going to change things, more times than not, people are concluding there needs to be regulation that comes from the government. So I think the question is fair to say, how do we involve politicians and our elected officials into the conversation? So,
Jeff, I would like to comment on that and just say that I think whoever or a conference, right, collectively that probably has an advisory board, we've probably all been on advisory boards for conferences, right? We select speakers based on the information that they want to share with the community and the value of that information to the community. I don't believe that it should be based on really anything other than their contribution to the community if that's valid, whether you agree with it or not. I think individuals, whether they are convicted criminals, whether they are people who are in politics, whether they are from whatever race, creed, religion, the criteria should be, what do they have to share with the security community? We can all judge people based on their political affiliation or whatever. I don't think that's right personally. I think that you may not agree with, for example, Edward Snowden, with what he did, right? And that's your right. You can voice your opinion about what he did or didn't do or whatever. But if Edward Snowden were to give a speech, I would want to hear what he had to say, because there might be some interesting things that I could glean that could potentially benefit the community, certainly.
But to the point, Paul, you would, but what if somebody is out there that, is diametrically opposed to Snowden as people are to, the issues that have been raised in terms of...
And I totally get the other side of that.
And, right?
And I do, because if you don't, if you're diametrically opposed to what that person believes in, the fact that they're speaking at a conference could promote what they believe in, and you're not behind. If you have someone who's a murderer come on the conference and talk, like, are you this is the tricky issue. Are you promoting murdering people, even though they may have some valid things to share? And I'll give you an example of this. My brother-in-law takes his high school class to the prison here in Rhode Island, and they sit and talk with someone who is a convicted murderer, right? You don't agree with what that person has done. However, it provides a valuable lesson to the students in, number one, wow, that was they come out of that going, he was a really nice person. I want to write him a letter. My brother's like, oh, no. You're not writing him a letter. You got to understand that bad people can lie and deceive you and seem like nice people. Secondly, you don't want to commit any horrible crimes. This person is in jail for the rest of his life. So there are valuable things that can come from listening to people speak that have done things that you don't necessarily agree with. However, I agree that some people may come down to my brother-in-law and go, look, why are you taking kids to prison talking to a murderer? Like, what if that is promoting the fact that, prisoners can now speak to children and glorifying maybe what they've done? I totally get.
But let me put on my Spock hat for a minute. So I'm going to put on my Spock hat. I'm going to take all the politics off this. I'm going to take all my personal feelings off this. Here's what I'm going to say about this. I don't know what they were thinking when they invited somebody who was a political lightning rod to speak at a non-political issue.
I agree, Doug. It's really just if you're going to promote a speaker, you got to do the background check and realize that there might be repercussions and maybe choose someone else.
And I think the decision to withdraw this person started to become about not necessarily some kind of politicizing issue as much as it was about, Black Hat is about getting people to come to the conference. There are people who would not come to this conference because of this person's political point of view, regardless of what he's speaking about. Right. There's people going to say, and it's going to turn into a political firestorm. The minute this guy's there, you're going to have people protesting out front. You have people protesting for him, against it.
But not just that. If it alienates a subsection of the community,
so what's the point? I can
totally see that point.
To me, it's like bring Langevin and McCall. So Langevin and McCall are the two co-chairs. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat of this Congressional Cyber Caucus.
If you want to be fair, let them co-present together on stage.
So you bring Langevin and McCall, the two co-chairs of the Cyber Caucus. This guy's not even a member of the Cyber Caucus. Bring the two co-chairs of the Congressional Cyber Caucus and let them be the co-presenters. You got a Republican, you got a Democrat. You take the politics off the table, and you say, let's talk about the issues that affect Black Hat.
And you and I and many others in Rhode Island, regardless of our political affiliations, have to admire Langevin for what he's done.
Yes,
for the cybersecurity and for the state.
I mean, you just strip away all the other stuff.
I was gonna ask you guys, beyond your guy Langevin, is there anybody else that's really qualified? To come in any capacity to speak.
Well, bring McCall. I mean, I don't agree with McCall's politics personally, but when you put the two of them on the same stage,
it's balanced.
It's balanced out.
It's like our political system.
You know what? These two, and I've seen these people speak. I've read the stuff they're doing on the Cyber Caucus. Go read that and go, this is not a political, religious, political, whatever issue. It's just about cyber.
Yeah.
And get them to talk about cyber, and don't go invite some lightning rod, left or right. It doesn't matter. Pick one. I don't care. Bring the two people together and put them on the stage, and I guarantee you they'll talk about cyber. And those two guys could sit up there to talk about. I've met with both.
Yeah, I agree.
I have met with both their delegations in person in Washington, and I'm telling you right now, I can sit there and I can talk to McCall's delegation about cyber, and we're not talking about
they don't drag
left issues. We were talking about cyber issues, and it was the same issue. It was the same issue I talked about Langevin office with. So listen. You got to think about these things when you plan a conference, and if you go out there and you're going to hurt your conference, you're going to cause a firestorm, and you're going to have protesters in the street. I think that was just a mistake on somebody's part. And
to summarize, I think what we're saying is good idea, not necessarily the right person.
Poor execution.
I would even go so far to say is maybe the proper way to get involvement, if we agree, and I think we do, that there should be some sort of engagement with our elected officials to talk about things cybersecurity.
I think that's very important, and I think it was great, the idea that we start to get Washington involved in some of these things, because it's important that they are involved. But it was maybe not the right choice of person.
Yeah. Right, maybe not the right choice of person, and I like maybe putting the spin on it because they're not necessarily the most qualified to talk on the subject, with other political issues notwithstanding.
Well, and I think what I take issue with, Jeff, is not necessarily the overarching political issues that deal with abortion that people have very strong feelings about, and I totally get.
It has nothing to do with cyber,
but it has nothing to do with cyber, but. In cyber, we're all, at least on this show, right, very passionate about involving everyone in engineering and STEM. And the fact that to me was the thing that was kind of brushed under the rug, right, was no, this person voted against the bill.
That guy went after STEM. I mean, come on, listeners. I mean, that guy went after STEM.
Yeah.
It wasn't about abortion. Let's just take that off the table. I'm not talking about that.
Went after an issue that's very near and dear to cybersecurity in the issues that we're dealing with in cybersecurity. I'm
not talking about women's rights or religion or anything else.
Exactly.
It was STEM.
It was STEM.
Think about that.
There's another piece here. He voted against him. If he was being there to talk about why the hell he think in his involvement with cyber, voting against STEM was the right thing to do, that's a different conversation than trying to bring in the abortion and all the other stuff. I'm not saying it's right that he voted against STEM, but that's right in understanding somebody else's point of view that you may not agree with. I have trouble with coloring the other stuff for saying that's why they canceled them. They should have done a better job of screening and thinking about it.
I agree. They should have done a better. And again, it's a tough issue, right? I go back to Jennifer's comments about hold on, wait a minute. What's the criteria for speaking, right?
Yeah,
that's a very, very slippery slope, and I think it does transition into our next article of who has the say as to what content is shared publicly, right? And it can even go down to
First Amendment.
But
I know you want to move on to penises. Final thought. You're as passionate as you are about the STEM issue. It's objectively just another issue,
I agree, Jeff. Yeah, no, I agree.
And you're either we as a community are going to embrace our elected officials regardless of their views and regardless of the stances, whether we're passionate about it or not. I mean, we necessarily, I think we need to have some sort of disattachment. Is that a word? And I think maybe that's what Jennifer was suggesting.
But it's tough, Jeff. I mean, it's like, where do you say, okay, we're going to bring Attila the Hun in to give us a few comments on cybersecurity? It's not a politicized issue, but it's like Attila the Hun. So,
but if he's the elected official,
well, yeah, if he's the guy making the decisions, but that guy Hurd was not even on the cyber caucus. He's not even a member of the committee.
You said that a couple times.
I know, and
I'm
ranting. You kids, get off my lawn.
I tried to suggest, Doug, that maybe we should focus on he wasn't necessarily the most qualified on the topic and get off the other.
No, I agree with
Jeff. Jeff has a valid point. Yep. You should be, in my mind, evaluated on your credentials and knowledge in the subject matter of the conference that your knowledge can benefit the community.
So to be
And final thought.
Go ahead.
I'll shut up after this. Final thought, maybe bringing a said elected official in as a keynote isn't the best way to engage. Maybe it's a roundtable discussion, a panel discussion, even a town hall type of format. I don't know if Black Hat or RSA has ever done something like that.
I think that's a great compromise, Jeff. My wife and I just celebrated our 13-year wedding anniversary. As you guys know, compromises are really important. Maybe it's a great compromise that there's a panel of folks that maybe have different views and opinions. In fact, we've had panel discussions here on Security Weekly where people have different views about security, right? And they all have something, whether you agree with it or not, that could benefit us as a security community. So maybe having it as a panel is
I think if you're going to get into politics, if you want to talk to a programmer about programming, cool. But if you want to get into politics, you should represent all the points of view. And that means it's going to have to be a panel because there's a lot of different points of view there.
Panel. Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And I think that the point for conference planners and other people is think carefully about who you're inviting.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, having done some conferences, sometimes it's like I called 17 people and this guy accepted. And, we're going to get that person. But don't do that. Go, think carefully about who you're picking and say, what's the agenda here? Why was this guy even wanting to be there in the first place? Is it really because he cares about cyber, or is it because of something else? And so if it's going to be politicized, you're going to bring elected officials, bring something that brings both parties to the table. Don't just go out and pick somebody who's a lightning rod and throw them up there and hope that it goes okay, because you're going to be sorry. I don't care which side of that you're on. You can be on either side. It doesn't matter.
But now, and I am going to transition to the next story. That
I know you want to move on to penises. We can move on to penises.
It's not about penises. It's about moving on to the next story. That it relates, and it's about who controls the content, who controls which content. But this ties into the conversations we've had about if you're a payment processor and you have policies about what goods and or services that are legal that you can sell, right? And in this case, the latest thing is that in 2016, there was an AI experiment from Google that guessed what users were doodling. It was an AI Pictionary. Google built into that because obviously if you've ever been in the situation that I've been in, where you're here at the Security Weekly offices and you hang up a whiteboard and you put out all the markers and it's a clean whiteboard, in the next few minutes, when you walk past that whiteboard, someone will draw a penis on it. It's someone.
Yeah, it's like
sometimes
possibly
it's me.
be called.
Sometimes it's me, right? You got to test the whiteboard and the markers, right?
That's right. And what better way to test it than by drawing a penis?
Google's the same thing. They basically put up a whiteboard for the internet, and what do people want to draw? They want to draw a penis, right? Like,
go figure.
If your 15-year-old nephew sees a car that's dirty, what are they going to write in the back windshield? Like, they're going to draw a penis.
I mean,
that's
it's like a human nature. It's like the genome or something. I don't know.
But Google specifically filtered out all of the penises.
Yeah, it was sad.
So put that specific content aside, I think it also ties into Jennifer's comments. Like, who gets to decide what's shared and what's not? Robert Graham had an article about, the freedom of speech and how, we use these examples and they're typically misinterpreted. Who gets to decide what information is shared? And I've said this before on the show, and it greatly concerns me that the large content providers such as Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter ultimately have a lot of power as to what can be shared. We saw this with, what was the thing that banned porn recently, and Pornhub was going to buy them. What was that?
I'm not up on my latest porn news.
Tumblr.
Tumblr,
right? Tumblr was filled with adult material.
They decided to
some of it was specifically pornography. Some
Tumblr
of it was,
no longer exists, by the way.
Some of it was, people were just sharing adult-themed post that was an expression, much like an artist would draw a picture of a naked person, right?
And it was straight up porn.
But everything in between, right?
Everything in between
right, sure.
art and porn and cartoons. Yeah.
Like straight up
porn. Yeah.
And straight up like artistic
straight up
expression,
porn, yeah.
right? And everything in between. And Tumblr made this decision that we're not going to allow adult content.
Yeah.
And like you said, Doug, like they,
yep,
right? And as Pornhub really wants to buy it and bring it back, I think rightfully so, to give people that artistic expression. And there's lots of other sites that
the tie-in here is sort of interesting, Paul, because you're trying to tie this into privacy issues, rights, censorship, which are necessarily regulatory legal issues under, we're in the U.S., so it's under the Constitution.
The First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
We've had various conversations in the past where people have expressed concerns about government overreach, and I have said on more than one occasion, why aren't we as concerned about the Googles and the Twitters and the Facebooks and the Apples as we are with the government, if not more so? So it's it's sort of coming to a head here.
Yeah,
I like what you did there, Jeff.
Yeah.
I didn't even make any silly puns about that. I told you it wasn't about the penis.
But I did.
But it's
not about the penis. That's the title for this episode.
Just the tip.
Not about the penis.
I knew
what's interesting
a strong
is
topic would come up.
But
these are hard issues, Jeff.
They are hard issues.
He's being slapped in the face with these issues.
And the First Amendment is so short, but it's printed on a very wide.
That's right.
It's a really long amendment.
But what's interesting, and I'll just throw this out, the First Amendment that we're citing has to do with government.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Correct.
Intervening or infringing upon the rights of citizens. What, and I'm asking this because I really don't know, what in the Constitution at all protects any of us against industry and companies and organizations?
Yeah. My view on that is very little, if not nothing, which for me is extremely concerning, especially having run a podcast
let's
that's
run
on the
with
internet
that,
for 14 years. Again, I'll state it on the show. We're very lucky that Apple has been very much hands-off on podcasts, right? Is not limiting content, is not going to the extremes that we've seen other major providers do. And let's be frank, as podcasters, Apple is a very important platform that allows us to exist and monetize on the platform, sharing information for free and being able to monetize on that and having that freedom of speech. They have largely not regulated that, and I thank them for that. I don't use their technology today. That's a different issue. They provide a great platform.
We get it. Yeah. So the irony here is we're agreeing that there isn't a whole lot in the law that protects us against companies. So what are we all beating around the bush and getting to? The government needs to step in and regulate.
Right. That's such irony. It's such irony.
That's the slippery slope of slippery slopes. Because I mean, literally,
can we all stop and take a drink?
Yeah. I think that's a good opportunity for that.
Yep.
But just as a key point, look, if your provider here calls you tomorrow and they say, look, you must advocate for Dear Leader, whoever Dear Leader is, on your show, on Security Weekly. I want every night, it's going to start with a picture of Dear Leader. It's going to start with everybody saluting Dear Leader and saying what a great job Dear Leader's doing. And if you don't do that, we're going to cut you off.
I know where you're.
It's a private. I mean, those private companies could do whatever they want.
I was trying to avoid talking about the articles that I read about China and harvesting organs, right? And then the whole political arena about how we're dealing with China. And basically what I come down to is like, I order all this great technology that allows me to prototype things and do things, and largely it's manufactured in China. And we have this really conundrum, right, about like, I understand many of the issues that surround specifically dealings with China, right? But at the end of the day, there's so much innovation and products that come to market that
Say it, and it's a cheaper or more affordable.
Absolutely, Jeff. The barrier to entry is so low. If I'm an innovative, motivated person that has an idea that involves hardware, I can get it manufactured in China and bring it to market at a lower cost. And I just, it's such a tough issue. I read about the things that happen in China. The most recent thing is the harvesting of organs for people who practice like what I've read. Again, I'm not the expert on this, but the brief things that I've read, a very peaceful Buddhist-inspired religion that the Chinese government has deemed an enemy of the state, and they're like harvesting their organs. But yet on the flip side, we're enabling so much innovation, and for people of all backgrounds to be able to come to market with their ideas and put things like IR transmitters and receivers in my hands for $7, right? Like, that's, speaking of STEM, right? I think that's also fueling that as well. Huge issues. They're not necessarily security related. Therefore, let's move on to
we don't have
what a
answers.
segue.
Let's talk about something we can.
That's called the shut up, Doug segue.
Right. So then we're going to talk about another. This is a political issue, I think, within our own circle of security professionals. There was an article from this comes from somewhere. Computer World is the one that published it, that says, ask the question, does applying patches as soon as they come out really help improve your security today?
No.
Now, it's quoted in the article, and I tell you what, I took a little bit of offense to the comment, right? Because they used the kind of air quotes security expert, like we don't understand business processes, which is okay, not everyone. I get it. In the generalization, it's a generalization, but I think brings up a point that we should discuss. He says, with a few notable exceptions, in the real world, the risk of getting clobbered by a bad patch far outweigh the risk of getting hit with a just patched exploit. Many security, air quotes, experts huff and puff at this assertion. The poobahs preach automatic update for the unwashed masses while frequently exempting themselves from the edict. That's some pretty strong language.
Yeah.
I can't say that I wasn't a little bit offended by that, and I know everyone's offended about everything today, but I read that and I'm like, again, I think there's a lot of generalizations in there. However, if we peel back those layers, which I understand, it's an expression, it's meant to invoke an emotional response, mission accomplished. However, when you sit back and think about that, put your offended side, feelings aside, I'm like, you know what, he's kind of right. I mean, look at the conversation we had with Bryson about how attackers are using available technology. They're using command and control channels that look seemingly normal and able to accomplish their goals. Is patching really that big of a deal today when it comes to your security architecture?
And I immediately jump into prod dev. And so the old world, mainframe world of dev gets approved and gets pushed into production. And I'm kind of with these guys. I'm like the unwashed masses, meaning the people that don't analyze, don't make a determination, don't assess, don't test patches. Probably they should be on automatic updates. And I mean, if your great aunt Sylvia, turn them on automatic updates. But as a corporate entity, you need to assess these patches, determine how they affect you, and make decisions. But you got to do that within reason. You got to triage it. So you have to look at these patches and go, is this urgent? You have to triage it. You have to decide, how bad is this? Is it something that's going to result in us getting completely compromised? Is it something that's going to, maybe out there on the horizon somewhere there's a threat? Or, it's just every...
But I think a lot of the subtleties that are missed in this article are like, when you look at an organization as an attacker, and like, what's the magic time for which you should have applied a patch? And if you're in an organization and 30 days after some major Microsoft vulnerability was released, you're not patched, is that okay? Or as an attacker, when you're looking at the network and you're like, there's still MSO 8067 on there. Therefore, I'm going to conclude as an attacker that security is completely lax in this organization. I don't need to do anything fancy. I can own this entire organization without too much trouble, right? Like there's a line as a then. So translate that to the defender. Where's the line? And that's a subtlety that this article, in my opinion, has missed. I don't disagree with the statement. I agree. Most organizations can probably wait some period of time before they apply certain patches, pretty much regardless of criticality. However, where is that line in the sand for you as
What's
an
the
organization?
threat, though? I mean, you got to
That's the
triage
subtlety.
it. You got to triage it.
It's
And look
not
at the
a
threat.
threat. It's not a threat.
It's more of a. We're talking about vulnerabilities, Doug, not necessarily.
Well, but I
threats.
mean, it is an issue of vulnerabilities and threats, and
you could derive threat from vulnerability.
You got to triage it and decide.
And Jeff, I know this is an issue near to your heart. As an attacker, if I see a 5+-year-old vulnerability in your environment, I'm going to assume that your security posture is very, very low, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's an issue for that organization.
But if you don't even have the thing, I mean, you may have things that you don't even run this
if
service.
you don't have the thing, you don't have to worry about applying the patch.
Exactly, but that's what I'm saying. That's what triage is. Triage is looking at the patch and saying, does it affect us? Is it a threat?
How
is it
does
a
it affect us?
vulnerability?
Right.
And where is the impact? And is there no impact? Then maybe we don't need to do it. But if it is an impact,
I'd say something slightly
Lee and then
Lee first.
Yeah,
Lee
then
first.
Jeff. Yeah.
Okay, so extending what Doug was saying a little bit, I think most organizations have a number of systems in them that are just effectively commodity desktops, and it's actually a large percentage of machines, and you can click automatic patch, although you should have some regression testing. You shouldn't day zero do it. But you want to save your efforts to the development production model that Doug, there's a much greater impact if you wipe out your payroll system than if you take down just a generic word processing system.
Now, Lee,
Modulo the CEO and his admin, that's
Lee,
a higher impact.
You are highlighting another subtlety that this article, in my opinion, missed, and that is to classify your systems and data and prioritize accordingly, because it's not just one priority level for all.
yes.
And I think
props
Doug
to you,
was
Lee.
saying some
Great
of that
point.
too.
Great point. Jeff?
Yeah.
So I think we are making a couple assumptions that, unfortunately, in my experience with customers, doesn't always hold true, and I think that partially complicates things. I mean, Paul, you talked about, as a defender, you're assuming that the company has a defender.
That's true. It's a good point. No, that's also fair.
There are far too many companies out there that are dependent on companies, organizations, think the healthcare world, despite some of our recent interviews. The best and only line of defense very often is the Windows patch cycle for a very Windows heavy environment. I'm curious I got lots of other thoughts, but one question is, does anyone see a difference between, because we're talking mostly the Windows patch cycle, do you see a difference in the urgency to install patches if we're talking simply the desktop environment versus whatever servers might be in an organization?
There's just so many variables that play into that, Jeff.
That's why I'm asking the question.
It's a great point, because it could be that if you deploy this patch to all of your desktops, you disrupted business operations.
Yeah,
certainly plausible. The same thing could be for your servers, right? And the opposite could be true. It could be, desktops are pretty resilient. It could be servers. It depends on your environment, right? I think.
Right. And so somebody in the organization needs to know, as you were saying just a minute ago, in terms of classifying systems and what's more critical or not, somebody needs to be able to make that determination.
Yeah.
You got to have a triage plan.
One
And
organization, it might be the servers. The next organization, let's say it's a hospital, healthcare center where everybody's walking around with tablets that are Windows based, and that's their bread and butter. That's more urgent maybe than whatever servers.
And I love this, Jeff, because it provokes thoughts of, if you're a systems administrator, not even a security person, like you're saying, Jeff, like someone needs to make the decision in the organization. Will this patch or update hurt us more than help us?
Yes.
Right? And that's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not.
It's not.
And many of us listening, right? All of us listening are going, yeah, I've had to make those decisions before. Even on my own desktop, do I update this application to get that new functionality to fix that security issue, or is it going to break my workflow, right? Everyone has had to make that decision, and it's never an easy one.
Yep.
And whether it's real or perceived, what's certainly popular in terms of reporting in the media these days is malware incidents.
Yeah.
And I think more often than not, the patches that we're talking about are designed to, patch the holes that lead to the, malware, or could lead to malware attacks.
I think, I think there's a small number of organizations that run software or write software that is truly resilient. Right, the patch level doesn't matter.
Small number.
My application, it's a small number, and that's what makes that decision so hard.
But I mean, I used to ask programmers to give me like an assessment of the likelihood something would crash. I mean, this is long
if
ago.
they're doing good unit testing, Doug,
they're doing good unit testing. But this is in the days before we had to deal with the internet. But I mean, I was asking programmers, what's the likelihood this piece of code that you just wrote is going to crash? But is it 50%, 70%? 20%.
But if they're in a modern development environment, which is a minority, it's a minority in terms of overall technology, you can answer that question much better, because you can look, I'm going to apply that patch. I'm going to go run the app. I'm going to go run all of my, not just unit tests, but QA tests and security tests. And I'm going to get back a score. And I'm going to tell you, like, basically how much stuff is failing. And that's going to answer your question about how much work it's going to be to adjust our software to accommodate that.
And that's your triaging that goes into your business model, and you say
still a small number of people, Doug, that can do that level of testing.
Oh, I know. I mean, it's like most people are going, go, activate,
So let me throw a wrench into the discussion, I have my drink ready.
Okay.
For many organizations,
please say PCI. Please say PCI.
That are required to follow PCI.
Yay!
PCI says you must install critical security patches within 30 days of release. Go.
So, in reading this article, I really think that that's what they're recommending, and I really do agree. I really think, and my view on this has changed, largely because I think there's a lot more technology available, and largely because I think that malware authors are relying on older exploits are typically the cause of breaches. And there are exceptions to this, but if you're patching everything with 30 days, like, you're probably mitigating much of the risk today. I got to be honest. I think once you get beyond 30 days, and this isn't a hard and fast rule, right? Once you get beyond 30 days, you're in some trouble.
But the problem is people take forever to do this.
They
look
take
at
years,
a patch.
right.
They look at a patch and they go, oh, yeah, we'll evaluate this. And then it strings out, and all of a sudden, 6 months later, somebody's still saying we're waiting to look at if this will impact any critical systems on the company. And they're still waiting, and they're still waiting, and they're still waiting, and they haven't patched, and all of a sudden they get popped. And that's what bothers me, because it's like they don't have a good practice.
And I totally get it. Like, my perspective on this has changed largely because I'm responsible for software. And when you look at, like, we need to make the transition from Python 2.7 to Python 3. And to model that and look at it, it's a lot of work. You have to balance that with business requirements, with other security requirements, right? And with all kinds of other things. And that's a really hard decision.
It is.
Not just in software.
Paul, you ignorant slut. It's all about making the app, making the service, making the company work. And are we able to meet performance metrics and make money?
It's true.
I don't know all that other stuff you're talking about. That's
functionality is king. Is that a lighter?
It's a lighter.
That's a lighter. It's my lighter for this PCI.
It's a PCI lighter.
You can't
There we
see
go.
this, but it's there.
So I was going to say that getting to the point where you can identify what has what kind of risks when touched takes time. I mean, I think we started working on categorizing systems and what kind of patches and getting from you'll patch this never to a monthly cadence on desktops and a little faster on servers, and some businesses a little longer. But that took about, I don't know, they're still working on it after
40
12
years.
I mean, we got a lot of progress in the first couple of years, but there's still outliers and there's still cleanup. You just don't stop. You have to have some accountability and follow up. You can't just let it go forever. You have to have something watching the guy who's supposed to be evaluating the patch, who's getting it on the 12th of never. That's going to be a problem.
I want to throw this monkey wrench out there, Lee, based on what you said. Like, if you've got to make this evaluation and this decision about should I retrofit my environment or my application for this patch, or should I put that on hold and implement these other security measures that will have a positive security impact? That's a very difficult decision.
Yeah.
Relate that back to my own, I'm looking at my own application. Should I devote resources to going from Python 2.7 to Python 3, or should I prioritize implementing a vault to protect my credentials, right? That's a very difficult question to answer when there's so many unknowns, right?
Yeah. Let me counter with another wrench. Why did Microsoft just put out a patch for Windows 2000?
Again, Jeff, I think the evaluation of risk has so many factors. It's very difficult to determine, do we apply the patch? Do we do the other security projects? Do we implement functionality? There's this constant juggling act that needs to happen.
It's a crazy
Whether
decision.
It's infrastructure, code, whatever it is, it's a juggling act.
It was a crazy decision. I mean, in 1986, it was a crazy decision because it was like, and it was so limited. You know, it was like, am I going to deploy this or not? Even then, it was crazy. Today, it's like, I've got a huge organization. I've got Windows 2000. I've got Windows XP. I've got all these different things, and I'm going to deploy this or not. It's just a deadly difficult decision. But you need a triage plan.
When's a DevOps or SecDevOps expert when we need them? Because what would they be saying right now?
It's interesting. Not everyone's there, though.
No, they're not.
I think we overstate. I really identify with the security benefits when you do DevOps, DevSecOps correctly. Totally get it. I've personally experienced the benefits of doing that, right? But not everyone's there. Like,
and I mean, the assumption we seem to make here all the time is that people actually have people who know what any of this even means. So often,
Exactly.
I get calls from people who call me and go, "What's the difference in Windows 2000 and Windows 2003?" You know, and you're like, "Do you not have anybody on staff who could actually make that decision?" And they're like, "No, a guy named Chet or something set this up back in 2009, and it's been running ever since then. And we're down, and we're not sure exactly what to do right now." And that's like terrifying to me.
At some point,
Well, and I think that's much more the reality.
It is.
than any of the use cases that we so often talk about.
Not everyone's as nerdy and deep in it as we are collectively as hosts and listeners to this show. And they're like, this app has been, I think we were talking about this, Lee, earlier yesterday, right? Like, the app works, everything's great, and now it's 10 years later, and like, guess what? The app is still, you were talking about a C application or something you wrote, right? Like, hey, it's like still running, right? Like,
well, I'm going to tell you a story. So my story is that in 1999, a company called me, and I wrote a piece of code for that.
I was just graduating college.
Yeah, I know. Well, I wrote a piece of code for that company back in like 1979. that printed.
I was 2.
I know. Well, I don't care. But I was a coder, by God. So there you go. So
now, that explains why I ask you about code and architecture
exactly.
decisions. It really
I was a
does.
coder when you were 2 years old.
But
and
that's
I
because
wrote
I'm smart and I ask people that have
Yeah,
doing
well,
it
so
longer
this
than
guy
me.
calls me and he goes, "Is this piece of code Y2K compliant?" And I'm like, "What?" I wrote that when I was like 16, dude. And I'm like, "Hell no, it's not Y2K compliant." And the guy's like, "Okay, I'm not even totally clear what that even means, but like we need to worry about that." And you're like, "Oh my God." And that's the real world. I mean, many companies.
But you commented your code, so it was pretty easy to figure out, right, Doug?
No, January. I tell you what, January 1st, 2000,
Every comment took a card. Come on.
January 1st, 2000. Largely everything was okay.
That code wasn't.
But that is true, Paul. But I think to some degree it was a non-issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to some degree there was a lot of work put into solving a lot of the
I agree, Jeff.
issues that were out there. So
but my point was that there's stuff that's out there. There's companies that just don't have any resources.
Why can't we have the Y2K for security? Like, why can't we evangelize something?
You're going to have it
for like 2 years and
You're
have
gonna have
everyone
it.
fix a bunch of stuff.
You're
it's
gonna have
coming
it.
up soon. The next Y2K
Oh, yeah,
is
it's coming.
when the Unix clock runs out or something.
Well, but
like
not
that?
even that. The Y2K for security is going to happen, and then it's going to be bad.
But
I don't know what it is yet.
The Y2K for software, though, as Jeff was saying, like largely, I think it was a non-issue because
It was, yeah.
we evangelized that 2 to 3 years beforehand, and a whole bunch of basically developers. I mean, let's be frank. Developers were like, "Yeah, let's fix our stuff."
I mean, I had a radio show and started in 1997. We were talking about that issue for 2 years.
Yeah.
And people were spending a lot of money to fix that problem, and they fixed it. And on the morning of January 2000, I was on the radio, and I said,
if you worked in IT or development in 1999 into 2000, you were at work on January 1st, 2000, making sure everything worked.
And I feel
I was.
Yes, I was.
Me too.
Yep.
I feel compelled to say, because it is 2019, to quickly summarize what was the Y2K issue was code that was written in the 20th century, in this probably going back to the 60s, probably more often the 70s, where there was a date involved because computers were relatively slow. Memory and storage space was a high-priced commodity back in those days. To save space in code and storage, many developers put dates in and only used 2 digits for the year. So it was 68, it was 72, it was 95, and there was a realization made when 2000 comes and we roll over. There was great concern about what was going to happen to all sorts of code that at that point was running, what we would describe today as critical infrastructure, IoT, ICS systems. Basically the entire world was running on code that was written for mainframes with a 2-digit code for the year. So there was massive efforts that were gone through for years up to that point to try to go through all the code that was out there and all the sub-libraries and sub-functions, and everybody tried to track down any place where there might be a date to change the integer variable from 2 digits to 4 digits to accommodate a 4-digit year. So, we know what it was, but I suspect that there might be a few listeners
it's a great
talking
point,
about
Jeff.
Y2K.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
It's an interesting problem related to security, right? If you're writing code today and thinking about, hey, if this code's running 20 years in the future, what conditions do like no one writes code like that, right?
No, but they should.
They should. I agree they should.
But none of us did. I mean, I wrote code in the 70s, and when this guy called me, I was like, what? How on earth could this still be being used? And they were like, oh, it works. We print our checks every week by pushing the F10 button, just like you told us. And I'm like, oh, my God. But they were, because it costs money to replace that stuff. and then they're going, it works. I push F10 every week on Friday at 4 o'clock, and all the checks print.
A lot of people made a lot of money consulting to fix Y2K.
Hells yes.
Because as you got into the late 90s, even in the late 90s, there were a lot of folks who were not COBOL programmers anymore.
Yeah.
There wasn't a whole lot of COBOL programmers, right? And COBOL programmers were making a lot of money because they knew how to program in COBOL.
Well, yeah.
Which is, I'm not knocking the language or whatever, but.
So.
Oh, no, it's awful.
Is it?
It's absolutely horrible.
I never
it's one of the most
COBOL,
awful languages
yeah.
ever.
I saw some, but yeah.
What I'm talking about is the next Y2K is that all the Unix clocks started, Unix time starts with January 1st, 1970. And what is it, Doug? It's a 32-bit integer.
I'm afraid so, Jack.
Maybe it might actually be, I don't know what it is, but
it's a 32-bit integer.
It runs out in 2038.
Yes, it does.
Which sounds like a long time in the future.
No,
but
it's really not.
Back when I was a kid, 2000 seemed like a long time in the future.
Yeah.
And in 2038, I'll be going, I told you.
So maybe none of this will be working then, but that's going to be the next big thing, is trying to figure out what happens when all the Unix clocks roll.
Yeah. That's the end of the world.
I'm kind of curious. See, that is going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 32-bit integers out there that are.
There's a lot of 32-bit integers going to have some bad problems.
Now I'm thinking about my own code and like what stores the data, isn't it?
It makes you clench.
And just for giggles, in the early days, a lot of people used the Unix system clock to randomize their pseudo random password generators.
Oh boy!
Yeah, it's like The Exorcist on that.
Oh, we were talking about programmers, and we made some comment. In any case, there's a backdoor in your living room was the title of the article, and essentially it was talking about Samsung TVs having all these heinous vulnerabilities. Now, the article goes into way more details and actually is an awesome article.
It is.
And I was telling our developer, Jack, who started yesterday, who's been awesome, and went through a very rigorous interview process because no one believed that a 15-year-old had the coding skills that this person had, and Jack does. And now that he's been here for 2 days, it's totally true. And so when I read this article, I'm highly offended. Again, I'm highly offended, and I'm not often offended by stuff. Like, ask people that know me, I'm not easily offended by anything. But this article highly offended me because they were talking about how the code on TVs is bad. And Samsung, or in other TVs, I think, or may just be Samsung TVs, run Tizen OS. And Mihai Niederman recently was quoted stating, "It may be the worst code I've ever seen. Everything you can do wrong there, they do it. You can see that nobody with any understanding of security looked at this code or wrote it. It's like taking an undergraduate and letting him program your software." Now, I take two issues with that. One, he used him. It could be him or her that wrote the code. That's just awful to say him.
But face it, it's more likely him.
Statistics have proven
I'll leave it there.
More likely him. And again,
it's written bad code.
I want to see all people write good software.
Yes.
Okay, first of all. Secondly, he says an undergraduate. And my comment is, our latest developer is 15, and he's a he. He writes better code than many other programmers that I've seen and has an understanding of code, architecture, and software design like I've never seen before. And Jack is an anomaly, but I think to say that letting an undergraduate is awful. I mean, was it Lee that stated you started programming when you were in high school? Doug, you said when did you start programming? High school. I started when I was 7, only because my parents signed me up for a programming class, and I was just lucky that my parents did that for me. Just really seriously lucky, right? And I'm not saying I wrote great code, but to state that age and or gender is a determining factor as to the quality of code you write is an atrocity, and you should be shamed for saying what you said.
I don't agree with
just
that.
to be,
You're
just
right.
To be
I
quite
don't agree
honest,
with
just
that.
to be quite honest, because I've seen people that have a lot of coding or claim to have a lot of coding experience that are maybe much older or of any gender, race, or religion, and I'm like,
I've had undergraduate students who could code circles around me and make me look like a fool. And so I'm definitely going to say you're right. That's a very poor statement.
Age,
I have a silly
gender,
question.
race, or religion has nothing to do with the nothing for you to check syntax. You should write your code, and and you laugh, but
that's hard, guy.
You should write your code to gain that experience, right? I think you should write code that is both compiled and interpreted to gain that experience. I'm not saying you got to spend years doing it, right? I think you should gain some experience doing that. I think in the end, I also think you should read Code Complete from Microsoft Press, work with senior developers to learn the right way to structure code, comment code. all of those things are going to contribute to you being a much better developer. I think it's all about experiences.
Yes.
And again, I think we're lucky, us older folks that are here on the show, right, that have coded in all of these older languages, older editors, compiled, plus interpreted. I think developers that are coming up now should do that. They don't have to spend years like we did. Like I spent years writing in editors, and you guys have too, right? Like, but I think everyone should have those similar experiences, Jeff. I think that should be taught in school. When you learn, you should write code in Notepad, right? In VI, like something that does
Come on,
nothing.
VI.
VI.
Well, yeah, that's
Rest
frank.
of your wimps.
And when you're in school, you're going to use Windows and Notepad, and and you should use VI, like whatever. In an editor that doesn't do any code checking, you should compile your code. You should have those experiences because in the end, it's going to make you a better software engineer. And whether that's your path or not, whether you're a security professional, sysadmin that maybe writes a little bit of code, that's a very, very valuable experience.
Efficiency is important,
Oh,
even
yeah.
if it doesn't matter.
I agree.
And being in, I mean, that's why.
But that's back to Jeff's point.
It is,
of going
absolutely.
when big data was, large amounts of data were thrown at my code, like it crashed. Like you need to have those
That's
experiences.
exactly. That's
I
why
agree.
Jeff and I get along all the time because we like cigars and bourbon, but we also understand that efficiency matters.
It does.
There's some fundamentals in coding that haven't changed. I mean, interpreted or compiled languages, it still needs to be efficient. The algorithms need to work. You've got to handle your variables properly. The code has to have no segments that don't get executed. Those things won't change. Punctuation, spelling, those things all matter.
And
indentation
Lee,
matters.
the thing that grinds my gears, right, that I talked about in Enterprise Security Weekly was spelling mistakes in the code. I don't care if that's in your code. I don't care if that's in your variables. I don't care if that's in your comments. Those details matter. If you can't write code that doesn't have spelling mistakes, you're at a significant disadvantage.
But I'm going to strip that out and say that I can actually define a type that lets me misspell stuff all day long, but it's the efficiency that really matters. I mean, if your code is not efficient and effective, it doesn't matter that you can't spell. You can write a type. You can type def a class.
It may not matter today, but I think ultimately it matters.
Well, I agree, Jeff, because at some point,
because I think it's a discipline.
The awesome programmers that I worked with when I was still in college, right? When I was still in high school, when I was 7 years old learning coding, really taught me that like all of those little things.
They do matter. I'm not saying they don't, but I'm saying that that's all part of efficiency. And if you write efficient
code. But they
code,
also taught me that, and I was just lucky to be working with folks that taught me this, that other people might have to look at your code. Right?
Amen,
and
brother.
The torments of the damned.
And also they
So
taught
I've been
me,
holding off asking, is interpreted code commented?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ooh.
Are developers just as bad as commenting today?
So here's another thing I talked about in Enterprise Security Weekly. The
Good.
other thing they taught me is that I might have to go back and review my own code and that you're going to forget how it worked. In fact, I talked about Jack, our developer, right? I was showing Jack a sample project that I did, and I'm like, I don't remember why I wrote this, like, let alone interpreting the comments or the code. I'm like, what was that? What was that project?
This
right?
is something.
I'm old now and I forget. But here's the thing: if you don't comment your code, but the point I made on Enterprise Security Weekly, if you don't comment your code, and putting this in a security context on the show, a lot of the code we write is going to be code that does automation in the cloud, that does a lot of the things we do in security today, but does it in code, whether it's a script, whether it's JSON, or an XML file you're defining to run your Ansible or Salsa or whatever it is, right? You're going to have to write good comments. Writing good comments is an art form in and of itself. It was only through developers I worked with that looked at not just my code, but my comments and told me, Joseph Betancourt, to this day, I thank Joseph for teaching me how to not just code, but write good comments.
Yeah.
Right? And that's important, not just for the people who inherit your code, but for the code that you write moving forward.
Well, listen, on forensics, we always teach people in forensics, you're gonna put something together. You're gonna do all this elaborate stuff, and you're gonna find these cool things. 7 years from now, you're gonna get a call on your phone. I have there's probably a video lecture you could find of me saying this. 7 years from now, you're gonna get a call, and somebody's gonna say, "Hi, Doug. We're going actually to trial tomorrow, or in 2 weeks, or 4 days, or whatever. I need you to testify on Monday, and I know it's Thursday night, but on Monday we're going to a hearing, and I need you to come in." And you're going, "This is something I looked at 7 years ago," and you got to be able to jump into that. What you did, you got to have that documentation. You got to be able to sit down with that and say.
And I don't want to pick on education, Doug, but I didn't learn how to write documentation in school. I learned how to write documentation from my coworkers in my career.
Well, you didn't take my programming class.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. No, I
you
really
didn't take my programming class, because I never stop harping on people about that, because I'm like, look, you're going to write
comments or documentation.
You're going to write a piece of code, and 8 years from now, somebody's going to call you, and they're going to go, "Is this Y2K compliant?" And you're going to go, "Oh." Because,
documentation. Yeah.
I mean, because you need to be able to go look at your code. If nobody else's code, you got to look at your code and say, "I know what the hell this is doing and how I got it to work 12, 15, whenever the hell it was." You got to be able to go back and look at that and say, "I know how to make this work,
Dude,
and I know what I did."
Like, even a couple of months later, that might as well be someone else's code.
Well, a couple of days later for me now, it's like, what the hell is this?
It's so true.
So the thing about comments is it's cultural. It's what you grew up with. My first exposure to comments was for the timeshare basic. We got the source code, which was assembler. And there was looking at the modules that we wanted to change, and they were great at comments. Although one of the developers was into soft porn, which made them exciting comments. But then later, as I started getting code pieces and things I wanted to do, the value of the comments that described what the heck it was I had were huge, and that stuck with me. Am I as good at writing comments as I should be? No, but I sure appreciate the hell out of them.
You know what, though? I also love funny comments, and I love that Jack, our new developer, was going through all the code, and he's like, "Dude, I've been like laughing all day, basically just like reading your comments." He's like, "The amount of swear words and like funny stuff in your comments." I actually think there's some merit to that, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone who's written software has more than likely put in a comment that's like, "I have no idea what this code does," right? Like but that's a valid comment. That's a perfectly valid comment. It is.
I always remember one from mine was,
back in the day they wrote the code. You're more likely pulling code from other sources. So
there
back
is
in the day, yes.
But Jeff, that's a great point. I think that people who are learning software today have the advantage of having the internet to pull code samples from. Before, if you were coding before Stack Overflow, right? I think that's very different, right? You were relying on looking at other people's code that you worked with, which is a very small sample, right? That you could pull code from, and that's a very short.
Well, look,
there was a transition from pre-internet to post-internet code, Jeff.
Yeah,
certainly.
Yep. But look, folks, if you put a comment in your code that just says, "I don't know what the hell this does, but it works," at least you put a comment there.
And that's a valid comment. I agree with you, Doug. That is a valid comment, because when another developer looks at that, you understand that the person that wrote this code didn't quite understand what this did, and that's valuable information, in my opinion.
No,
really
absolutely.
Is.
And I remember telling a student, I had a student
Yep.
at game when I used to teach game programming. I had a student. I said she pulled in a bunch of code, and I was like, "I don't even know what the hell this does." And she was like, "I know. I found it on this like site."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Then just write a comment that says, 'I don't know what the hell this does, but it works and it generates the image I wanted.'"
Sure.
At least then, when you go back 12
Valid,
years from
yes.
now and you look at it, you'll go, "I didn't know what it did then. I don't know what it does now, but I better figure it out." And I mean, I think it's so critical that you document these things in your code. If you don't, you're gonna pay later. They'll always be deposing. I tell people all the time, ABD, always be deposing. So when you're sitting in that deposition and they're saying, did you know what this did? And you can go, well, the comment right there says, no, I didn't.
Right.
I mean, at least you know that you didn't know what the hell it did. You just stuck it in there. And I think that's really, and we do that all the time. We all do it. We go find a code snippet, we stick it in there and go, that works.
I think that, just to summarize, documentation or comments, the way you learn, at least for me, the way I learned what the difference between a poor comment was and a good comment was a senior developer looking at that and coaching you through, that's a bad comment. And to make it better, you need to describe it this way. It's kind of, it's a very difficult thing to articulate. There's a very sharp contrast between.
I used to tell people, you have a chance to talk to your future self.
Yeah.
And this is your chance.
I love that.
Put it there and talk to your future self and tell yourself, because one day
when we get to 2038, we know.
Hell yeah. You go, hey, man, if it's 2038, you're screwed. Put that in your comments.
And if you want to understand how that works, watch Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
It's a great point, Jeff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great point. Other stories you want to cover?
Nah.
But we have other stories.
Nah.
I know we've been really talking about
This
code.
has been the philosophical programming episode.
I love it.
So actually, there was one. It's a really lightweight story. It's my last one, and it was about a Pennsylvania trucking company that got ransomwared. And what was cool about it is they went totally transparent. They put on their website, we got blown away. These things are offline, and the next day these things are back online, but these are off. And our customer service deck is online. They got pen and paper. They will take your orders. I mean, so many people, you hear it, ransomware is the end of the world. They have no idea how to pick themselves up and keep operating and communicating with their customers. I just thought it was really clever. And this is not a big company. It's a little guy.
But, Lee, what's interesting is, for one, I really suck at math. Like I stated before, I started using a computer and programming when I was 7. I think, take for that what you will, I think that really kind of made me suck at math, because I'm like, why do I need to be good at math? Because computers can do that for me, right? Like really, like I do, and I struggle like helping my kids with their math homework. I'm like,
case in point, you were actually 11.
Yeah, no, I was 7, but the thing is, when I look at my children's math homework, I'm like, I could write a program that could like fill in all the answers for your math homework, but like in my head, like doing the math, I'm like on my phone using the calculator. It's awful. I agree, it's awful, but I think it speaks to people's mindsets and their aptitude towards solving problems, right? And so, and so we're getting the cash register.
I agree,
thing. If cash,
but it's also why
speaking of
some of
PCI,
us,
Jeff, right? Like if cash registers go down, people like myself that are like, I don't know, I could tell the computer how to do the math, but like I can't do the math myself. They're going to struggle when the computer goes down and they have to do the math themselves, right? Like it's a conscious effort for me to learn the math and do it. But that's a huge issue. What if in today's day and age, the computers go down and everyone's forced to go to the old everyone who's a host here on the show
Get out your
remembers the old cash registers, right, where you had to like punch in all the, like my grandfather had one in the barber shop, had an older
I don't appreciate
one in his
that
basement,
grandfather reference.
like awesome, like cool cash register, right? That like did the chunking thing and yeah, right. But like we'd have to do that in our heads when the iPad that's running our point of sale system goes down.
Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of a pet peeve, curmudgeon-y thing, because my family was in retail when I was a kid, and I was trained to, when somebody, when you have a sale and somebody gives you money, you count back the change up to the amount of the currency that they gave them. So, if the bill was $13.50 and they give you a 20, you give them back. Okay, here's 50 cents. So, $13.75,
Right,
14. Right. Here's $1.15. Here's $5.20.
That's a lost
Now,
art today, Jeff.
Some of it,
and
it's been a lost art for years because, I'll go in and I'm an old timer, so I use. I'm getting to that point where I rummage in my pocket for my change. I want to use it up. I'm the guy that everybody hates, slowing everybody down. But give somebody.
Jeff, you're the person that gives them more than what the sale cost is, right?
2015.
Yes, I'm the person that gives them.
I'm going to give them $20.20.
I give them 21 1/4.
Oh God!
Because I want to round up to something.
Yeah.
I'm
but
that
you'll
guy.
get a $5 bill back.
Oh my God!
But how many? And maybe you've only witnessed it because you're not that guy. But how many clerks, they just kind of stare at the money you've just given them, and they're like, I don't know what to do. And I tell them just type in the amount.
Right. Yes. Let the computer do the math.
Let the computer do the math.
It's like a B-sod of humans. I did that to somebody recently. I handed them some bills and some coins, and I'm like, there you go, with that $5 back, and they're just like,
It's like exception, core dump.
Yeah.
But
Try, catch, exception. Yeah. Oh my God!
It's equally as common to have the clerk say, "Well, you've given me too much. I don't need this. You've given me too much." And I'm like, "No, just type in the amount. Trust me."
Then you got to do the truck driver trick and go, "No, I gave you 4 20s. You owe me 6 20s back."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the person go, "What?" They're like, "I gave you 4 20s and 100, and you need to give me 6 20s and 200s back." And they're Yeah, that's the modern age.
My pet peeve has been, the computer says 650, so they're like 5, 6, 50. I'm like, that's not how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Do it. It's a dime.
I did 5 years in retail too. I completely relate to Jeff.
That's because we're all old.
Yeah, well,
I
did even worse trick. My boss and I were left-handed, so we put the change in and the cash in the drawer the other way, which was fine. It was just us. Started getting right-handed. It was a pain in the ass.
I had one of those.
You guys count backwards.
Yeah, I had one of those. I worked at a truck stop, and there was a left-handed clerk on the evening shift. It was bad. Yeah, it was like, what the hell is this?
Did you have pickled eggs at the
We
truck
did
stop?
have pickled eggs, and we had pickled pig's feet, too. And you could stick your whole greasy arm that you had been, impregnating sheep with earlier down in the bucket and pull out a pickled egg.
Well, you were in Tennessee, so that's probably a reality.
Yeah, it was great. It was yummy.
Is a tangent that is way out of control.
Should really close the show.
Tell you, how do we top that? Hey, have you tightened up your Venmo?
I win.
Yet? He says, changing the subject.
There's articles that actually talk about security in the show notes.
There are.
We chose not to talk about them because this was way more interesting for us to talk
We've
about.
had so much fun.
Oh, we had a lot of fun here.
This is so much fun.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part of the week.
Lee, we're ending the show again. Wiki.securityweekly.com. There are actually
There's actually relevant articles on the wiki.
We've just kind of been talking during this segment, which is what it's all. It's what it's all about.
That's why you're watching.
But our listeners generally tell us these are their favorite episodes. So
I had a lot of fun. Hopefully, our listeners were entertained and informed in the segment, even if we didn't cover all of the stories. But you can go read those on your own.
Yeah,
we talked about the ones
about penis doodles.
Penis doodles.
What we were passionate about. I feel like we talked about in this
Hells
episode.
Yes,
Lee.
Absolutely.
Johnny wants you to take us out. So Lee. I'm going to Lee.
Okay, thank you so much. Over and out.